Welcome to the Dr. Grimmy Show, old-time medicine show and conversation extravaganza. We are having some technical difficulties, but here I am. We probably will have to work out commercial breaks and that sort of thing. Give me a call if you want to join the conversation, 801-254-1640. Hey, I have a Facebook page, KTalkMedia.com has some archives. You can listen to my old shows. I'm on Facebook and the Dr. Grimmy Old Time Medicine Show and Conversation Extravaganza under that name. K-Talk are the station I'm at, AM 1640. Has a K-Talk page on Facebook, K-Talk Utah. We have a SoundCloud where K-Talk Media, you can listen to what our most recent shows are and go to playlists and play what you want to hear if you missed it. So let's get started. Tonight on the Dr. Grimmy Show, I talk about esoteric and unusual and strange things that don't normally get talked about. And as the Halloween season is coming up, I've decided to talk about ghosts. My first show was on ghosts, so we're kind of retreading a little bit, but that'll be fun. I'm sure some of you were not here in those heady days of the early times of the Dr. Grimmy Show as I learned my chops here on the radio. We also have a Twitter at KTKK on Twitter, Instagram at KTalk Radio. So if you're interested in a topic on the Dr. Grimmy Show, go to my Facebook page, Dr. Grimmy Old Time Medicine Show, Conversation Extravaganza, and suggest a topic. And we'll see what happens. I never know. You know, there's lots of people who call, lots of callers, lots of interesting individuals who ask questions and kind of inspire me to go on to other things. We've talked about all kinds of things in that regard, and I have a whole list of possibilities. I want to do a show on alchemy. I want to do a show on the Kabbalah, which is a rabbit hole of massive proportions. I don't think I'll be able to do it justice, but maybe we'll find a guest who could talk us through it a little bit. We'll see what happens. So what is it about ghosts? One thing we're looking at tonight is we may or may not have commercials, so let's have some fun if you want to call. No breaks are a good thing. We're in the middle of a move. Apparently the station is moving to a new location, so things are stacked and scattered and turned off and on and whatnot. It's kind of spooky, haunted, ghost-like in here in the K-Talk studio. So I've turned on all the lights because, you know, I get scared. Anyway, we're going to talk about ghosts. Ghosts, those spirits of the dead. And the definition of ghost, just arguing, you know, and humans love to argue, but just arguing over what a ghost is no small thing. Everybody has a different idea of what a ghost, what a spirit, what it is. You know, what is this thing that we describe as what we call a ghost? You know, I mean, we intuitively know. Most of us, if I say ghost, we kind of know what we're talking about. We kind of know the nature of, you know, what we're speaking of. I mean, we just kind of get it, you know, because we tell ghost stories. We talk about haunted places. We talk about, you know, the phone rang after Grandma died. We're going to talk about a lot of different things in regards to the spirit world and the spirit people, if you will, which could be another word for ghost. I like to be educational. I like to learn you something you didn't know before. So we're going to talk a little bit about just the nature of ghosts. Lots of titles cover ghosts. You know, they call them specters and spooks. There's a great book. What's her name? Well, she does several books on different topics, but one of the ones that I got exposed to was called Spook. She's a female investigative reporter, does things somewhat tongue-in-cheek. Let me see if I can come up with her name, because I think it's a worthwhile something to send you on, an adventure to Amazon Books. Book. Let's see. Spook. Dun, dun, dun. Science fiction tackles the afterlife. Lots of it, but none of the ones that I want to talk about. Oh, well, never mind. Mary Roach, that's her name, Mary Roach. She kind of approaches the idea of ghosts. Was a somewhat kind of a fun way. So let's talk about ghosts. And let's start with language. When I was kind of researching for this show about ghosts, and being an anthropologist, I bumped into the concept of ghost, of ancestors that come back and cause you grief depending on your behavior in this life. We're going to talk, let's talk the language. Ghost as a word has an etymology, and it says that the English word ghost continues from the Old English ghast. Now, this is a hypothetical. I'm kind of pulling some of this from. I'm not a linguist, so I had to steal this information from somebody, which reflects a term of something of anger or fury. And so, when we talk about from an anthropological perspective of spirits or ancestors that are trundling around, that is not perhaps an uncommon possibility, is that these ancestors would get angry, they could cause you harm, and so to reflect that in an Old English language, which New English, if you will, comes from. Common German is Geist. Lots of explanations on North and South Germany. But let's see. What else? When we talk about language, the soul of a deceased person is kind of what we're talking about. In Greek, pneuma, breath, the idea, and even in the biblical term, in Hebrew, God breathed life into Adam. We get this idea of breath, this sense of something that we know moves but we can't see it, which is kind of a good term for what we're talking about in regards to ghost. Spook, the term we use the title of Mary Roach's very well-written book, is a Dutch word. We're not sure where it comes from. It kind of snuck over into English to kind of talk about this spirit, this form, this unseen. We get the Scottish term wraith, which impacts and creeps into Old English, if you will. J.R.R. Tolkien kind of played with that term rather consistently. We see it. Wraith is somewhat of a term in the modern sense, is a spirit of vengeance, and if we see a wraith, it's not just a regular ghost, it's usually a ghost, an angry uncle who hasn't been fed. In ancient times, early religious views of the world, the idea of ancestor worship was not uncommon. We understood the concept of life as people. We see it in our day, we experience it, and so in early times, it was said that this process that animates us, this pneuma, this spirit, this breath, continues after the physical body stops moving around, and that as conscious entities, they have to be appeased, and that the afterlife had kind of a dark, somewhat lonely understanding. It was a very lonely, dark, and dreary sort of place to be. That ghosts had a couple of characteristics. They were hungry. We kind of see a bit of reflection in this in the zombie mythos. The dead come back to life, and they are ravenous. That is a very common view of the nature of ancestors who have passed on. And And so one of the techniques to deal with these ancestors was to put out food, to put out, things to appease them, that sort of thing. In the early Greek period, which is where we get a lot of our thinking about ghosts, as the Western tradition goes, we understand that the afterlife again was kind of this dark and dreary place, but that the dead went to the afterlife, and only and they went to the afterlife when the rituals of death were performed correctly. So an individual who died without appropriate burial ritual, would then haunt the particular place or location that they were at, and they would be angry and frustrated about not being able to go to the afterlife, to not have the appropriate rituals performed on their behalf. And we see in the early stories of the dead in the Iliad and the Odyssey, it being important that they be treated well. That if they were not, they would be these angry spirits people would go out of their way to avoid places where these kinds of deaths occurred, particularly for individuals who did not have the appropriate rituals performed, appropriate burials. And most of the early ghost stories told in by early Greek writers dealt with that idea that this spirit would be throwing things at people and causing harm, and that only after a person discovered the body or the remains and then rendered appropriate ritual would they rest easily and stop bothering the living. We kind of see some of that in the sense of now in this modern world of haunt, where a ghost remains in a particular place. And in the modern world today, we see that as kind of a haunted place, a place where death occurs. We haven't equated it. We've kind of become very worldly, and we don't necessarily equate the failure to perform proper ritual as a reason for ghost or haunting. But we do. But as a modern world, we do kind of see the idea that when in places that death occurs, particularly violent death or sad death, suicides and that sort of thing, we see, this remaining behind of this angry or disturbed or sad spirit, and so there we get the understanding of ghost in that sense of this afterlife, this continuation of the physical. Well, gosh, we run into a lot of theological and scientific stuff. What is a spirit? It's obviously something that's not able to be measured scientifically. Scientists of CERN have said, we have a pretty good understanding of the framework of the physical nature of the universe, and we don't see any equation that allows for ghosts or of a dualist. We would see the numbers, we would see the math, if there was such a theory that would account for that sort of thing. But we also know that CERN has probably caused the Mandela effect, and so everything we believe can't be trusted. But that's a whole nother show. We'll go, we may have some fun with that in the future. So we, humans have been dealing with humans dying for a long time. And there's always, even in the earliest days, we find Neanderthal burials that have what we would call ritualization. In other words, specific acts done in specific times for very specific purposes. And we find these Neanderthal burials, we find them buried and covered in red ochre, and there's usually grave goods of some kind things of value, generally speaking. Now, today, when we bury somebody in the West, we put them in the ground, we put them in their best clothes or some type of clothes that represents them, a uniform, a favorite attire. And in many cases, we'll put, they'll be buried with things of value that they have, a necklace, a wristwatch, and many people will put things in the casket during the viewing here in the West that to go with them, little grave goods. We do that today, and I suspect that was true in the ancient times, that people would place things in the grave that had value for that person. And anthropologists and archaeologists love to try to figure out stuff. Why this, why that? There's a great book, if you're interested in that kind of thing, called The Hotel of the Mysteries, that kind of describes the strange aspect of anthropologists and how anthropologists look at ritual and grave goods and physical remains, showing the toilet seat around her neck as a headdress sort of thing. Kind of the anthropologists sometimes, in their effort to describe, maybe not so much. Hey, we've got a caller. Let's bring them on. See what we can see what they have to say. Now, like I said, I've had some technical difficulties, so bear with me. Okay, caller, can you hear me?
Yes, Dr. Grimmy, can you hear me?
Oh, there you are. How are you, truck driver Ray?
Good, thank you. Interesting subject tonight.
Yeah, I'm trying to, we're running on, apparently the computer is kaput, so I had to turn off one show and start my show. So there's no breaks tonight. So, we'll try to just keep it going. No breaks. It means I'm going to sit here for 4 hours without any breaks. That could get interesting. I may have to create a break sometime near the end. We'll see.
Well, I'm used to winging it. Did you ever see that movie? Quite a while back, called The Flatliners?
Yeah, that was an interesting discussion of the concept of death.
They had some Halloween experiences when they were in medical school, and according to the movie, and they put themselves, they flatlined themselves.
Right, and they tried to go longer and longer. And the longer they went, the closer they created some sort of connection to the afterlife that, hey, you were here too long, you got to come back. I can't remember the exact, but the ones who were there the longer had the most difficulty.
Yeah, they were haunted by some things they did to people, in their past.
Do you have a ghost story for us?
Well, if you have a computer there, look up Technical University of Berlin, NBE.
The Technical University of Berlin. I got to type all that in.
I'll just tell you about it then.
Okay,
Technical
you talk,
University of Berlin. Okay. Well, it seems the story is that they put over 900 people to death and brought them back. They used 2 chemicals, and they also have like a machine that pumps air or blood through their system. And
kind of losing you, Ray. Are you talking on the phone or driving? Hello? Earth to Ray. Sounds like we dropped Ray. Sorry, Ray. I hate it when that happens. Call back. I thought I might have another caller, but our line 3 doesn't blink. Hello? Nope. Okay, so hate it when that happens. Here, we might have Ray back. Let's see. Is that you, Ray?
It is.
Okay,
it is.
I figured I lost you. There probably is somebody else, and they're like, I don't know anybody named Ray. Okay, University of Berlin, Technical University of Berlin, sounds kind of creepy, and they're bringing people back to life. How are they? Are they killing them? Or are they just digging them up? What are they doing? Oh, this is such a great story, and we're losing him. Well, we'll try to bring him back because I think he's teasing us. He's teasing us with this. That's a great movie, The Flatliners. This discussion of what it's like after life. I've got a guy who I'm trying to develop a guest who's had a OBE, as it's called, an out-of-body experience, an afterlife experience, and it may or may not relate to the topic of ghosts, but it is similar in that ghost appears to be an experience of afterlife. So perhaps this out-of-body experience, this near-death experience, as we call it, is something that is related. So everybody, for some reason, we have this natural fear of ghosts. Even kids, say ghost, and they almost intuitively understand what you're talking about. They intuitively understand this idea of things that live beyond life, and that they aren't necessarily entirely friendly. And that seems to be a common thread of the ghost mythos, is that ghosts that we interact with generally have some sort of negative connotation. They're haunting a particular place or a particular person for various reasons. And usually we find ideas of vengeance, we find ideas of closure, we find ideas of maybe just being playful. It is, and again, this topic is a very broad topic. There are some categories of ghosts. We find the ghosts, haunting experience, things get moved around, cupboards get opened and closed, footsteps are heard. That was my ghostly experience. I was a volunteer doing some doing some work in the basement of the Union Pacific building, working for the State History Museum. They have a museum there, and they have down in the basement, it looks just like you would expect, a very creepy, dark, dreary basement with lots of shelves with boxes and things on them. And while I'm in there and I'm cataloging items, I'm getting these boxes of things that have been donated, collected, or whatever to the museum. And what I was working on was copper railroad advertisement, for the newspaper, that these would be inked and stamped onto paper. And they were specifically for the railroads, which is why they were being collected. And so while I'm saying, copper plate, picture of railroad engine, description of what it said, I hear footsteps off in the distance, off in the next hallway. And I thought, well, I have a question. And there was another gentleman, I would catalog, write the stuff down, get it all written up nicely, and then I would put it in another spot, and it would go to the photographer, who would then photograph the item, and then it would go into the computer, and then they would but put away the item. And so we had this little kind of assembly line going. And so I have a question about something, so I said, well, I better ask the guy. So I hear footsteps, and I walk out on the hallway, and I don't see anybody, but I hear the footsteps down to my left. I go down to that way, and I think, oh, they're going to the elevator, but I get to the elevator and there's nobody there. And I thought, well, gosh, they must have gone a little bit farther, which is away from where my work area. I thought, well, this is a place that I haven't been. And I walk down the little hallway between all the shelves, and I hear the footsteps kind of off to my right, down one of the little pathways between the shelves, and it's just as if I'm just behind these footsteps. I just quite can't catch this person. And so I get to the corner, they're not there. I go to the corner and said, hey, I don't get any answer. And I turn the corner where I absolutely know is a dead end. and I'm going to find him, and there's nobody there. So I've been following these footsteps. So footsteps, hearing footsteps of various types is a ghost experience. It's one of those things that would be a physical manifestation of a ghost haunting. Some people hear sounds, voices in other rooms. It was not uncommon in the University of Utah in the early days when I was a security officer there. The old dance building, which has been tore down, was a building you didn't want to go into at night because there was always something going on, supernaturally, if you will. There were some pianos in the building, and you would hear somebody playing the piano. And, of course, at 2 o'clock in the morning, they're not supposed to be in there playing the piano. And if they are in there playing the piano, you probably want to see who they are and make sure they're supposed to be there. So you would go chasing the piano music, and there'd never be anybody in any of the dance studios playing the piano. So, that kind of creeped a few people out. There is another type of ghost that's not uncommon. The lady in white. It seems to be a common thread, probably related to the banshee sort of. When we get into the Irish, we'll talk a little bit about the banshee as a ghost or a harbinger of death. But this lady in white is seen in many places as a manifestation of a haunting. Was it Gardner Hall or the other one? It was the theater. And so one of my friends working security went in there to have his lunch. He went into the theater because it was that time of the night to check that building. And he sat down in the theater and he opened his lunch and he's eating his lunch. And, it's 3 o'clock in the morning and he dozes off. And all of a sudden he feels something poke him in the arm and he looks over and there's a lady sitting next to him. And he's startled. He's terrified. He's been caught sleeping on duty. And he's horrified that he's going to lose his job and it's the end of the world. And he freaks out and he grabs his lunch. He says, and he puts all the stuff in his lunch sack and he looks up to say, I'm sorry. And there's nobody there sitting next to him. And of course, there's no possible way that an individual would have been able to leave the theater from that location without him having seen them leave. So he made it a commitment to never go into that building again as part of his experience. So there is, the University of Utah, I spent a lot of time working there, so there are ghostly experiences in that environment. And that, I think, is true of many places, that perhaps some have more than others. But if you're at a location long enough, you're going to perhaps have what could be titled a supernatural experience, whether it's the footsteps, the talking, the sound, or the lady in white sort of experience that my friend had. Ghosts are different cultures, different traditions, different lifeways have different ideas and understandings of ghosts. In places where, in ancient Egypt didn't have, they had a very strong sense of the afterlife, but there wasn't a lot of ghost story in their world. They did perhaps have their relatives of a person would make offerings to appease, but it wasn't a very common thing in Egyptian processes, in spite of what we see in the Egyptian mummy movies, of the concept of ghosts and haunting in Egypt. Classical Greek, as I talked about, had lots of stories of ghosts, people who had died that basically had not had their appropriate funerary ritual performed. They weren't buried appropriately. And so there was what was it? It was in February. It was called the Lamnia. It was a ritual performed on the night of the 1st or 2nd, I can't remember exactly, I'll have to read my FOSTI again, where the homeowner, and it was particularly for homeowners, would get a handful of beans and toss them over their shoulders and tell the ghosts to leave. Now, ghosts apparently are OCD, and we find that to be a thread in the death, in the idea of death, that ghosts and things that are dead have a seem to have this this obsessive compulsive disorder. One way to thwart a vampire is to throw a handful of flaxseed on the ground, and so instead of biting your neck and drinking your blood, the vampire would stop what they were doing and have to count and pick up all of the flax seeds. And that seems to be the case when we're talking about this lamnia, this ritual in ancient Greece about throwing black beans over your shoulder to keep the ghosts busy. Which is I wonder where that comes from. I'm going to have to do some more research on that, because I think it's an interesting dynamic. Why are ghosts? Why are people who are dead, if you will, or things that are dead, such as vampires? Why are they OCD? Where does that come from? We got another caller. Let's see what they got to say. Hello, caller.
Hello.
How are you?
Okay, what are you guys talking about tonight?
Well, tonight we're talking about ghosts. You haven't been listening, I take it.
No, I don't have a radio anymore. So.
I've been pontificating brilliantly.
About what?
About ghosts, about the afterlife, about the death. Primarily, we're talking about ghosts and ghosts mythos, that sort of thing.
If there's a ghost, wouldn't there be some sort of afterlife? Or?
Well, and that is one of the implications, is that if you have a ghost, you probably have some sort of afterlife. Now, what it looks like, there's lots of views of that, but instead of talking about the afterlife per se, it just, I wanted to kind of focus on the idea of ghost. Do you have a ghost story? Have you had an experience with what may or may not have been considered ghosts?
Oh, well, yeah, one time I seen a little something that could have been a ghost.
What happened? Give us the poop.
Well, I live by these railroad tracks where there's always accidents before they had lights, railroad lights,
Yep.
And me and the wife was going over these railroad tracks in the middle of the day, and I'm looking off to my right for the train, and I think she's looking there at the same time. And there was this little, salamander off of like white stuff. And I actually asked her, I just said, "Did you see that?"
Huh.
She goes, "Yeah." So that's about it. But there are a lot of people killed in those areas right there. So
yeah, railroad tracks and railroad crossings, particularly crossings, and
yeah,
because a lot of people seem to get killed at crossings, but they also seem to have any crossing, whether it's a bridge or crossroads, seems to have a aura or a mythos of ghosts or spirits or some sort of paranormal. But railroads are, you could do a whole show on just railroad ghosts.
Yeah, those trains just come out of nowhere, especially with this tracks. Now they don't even blow the whistles anymore.
Yep.
Of course, they got crossing guards, but
you don't want to wake up the neighbors.
Oh no, So I just haven't called in for a while. So, but
yeah, we're having some technical difficulties, so I'm not having commercials. I'm hoping that the news will show up at the top of the hour, but we'll find out.
What is going on with the news? We still at war with Russia, or there's still?
I have no idea. To be perfectly honest, it's probably, I'm guessing, about Donald Trump. Let's pull up and see what's going on. Since I can't listen to the news. Let's see, breaking news and updates. Let's see, I doubt there's anything about ghosts, but you're right. Let's see, tentative agreement reached for Kavanaugh for a hearing. So I guess the accuser of Mr. Kavanaugh has made some agreement to be interviewed or questioned by the Judiciary Committee.
Who's this? Kavanaugh? Who's he?
Kavanaugh is the Supreme Court nominee Donald Trump put forward for the vacancy on the Supreme Court. He's a conservative, as you would expect.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay,
He has
yeah,
some baggage, apparently. A female stepped forward and said that he assaulted her during college.
Oh, man. I can't imagine any female stepping forward and accusing somebody.
Well, you know, the interesting thing that I've been bumping into is a lot of women have been describing just how difficult it is to come forward. That the blowback they get.
Of course they do when it's all a made-up story.
Well, then it's.
I'm not buying it for 5 seconds.
I'm not going to discount.
I know, but they're gold diggers. 99% of them. They just want their 5 seconds in the limelight, so to speak. Just look at me, and make up some story, and I don't buy any of that stuff anymore.
I
Not
struggle.
One word of it.
I understand that it's difficult to come forward, but I still struggle with if that 40 years is an awful long time to wait, and then to come forward.
At
this particular time.
Yeah, I'm not struggling with it for 1 minute.
I don't know. I mean, but consider the other side of the
opinion. No, I don't even consider the other side of my coin.
Well,
I know how. No, I know how women are, and it's just a made-up story. I will guarantee it.
What about men who are accusing Catholic priests of sexually assaulting them while they were children? Now that some of these events occurred 35, 40 years ago.
Yeah, another row of them.
And yet we're giving credence to those accusations.
Any of those people that come forward with some, past life experience 40 years ago, and they're all hurt because of something that happened. They want to blame somebody because, this is the society we live in. We're all victims. And so if we can blame somebody, a pope or somebody that has money, then, that's all well and dandy. I don't buy those stories either. Yeah, I'm not prejudiced. I'm not buying those. I'm just not buying them. So anyway, that's just one man's opinion.
All right.
So,
yeah.
Anyway, nice talking with you. Bye.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for calling. So we got a little bit distracted, but that's okay. Like I said, I haven't heard the news much. Let's see what else. Congressional sources blindsided by Trump's FISA declassification decision. And nothing else. No ghost stuff. Not a lot of ghosts in the news. It is somewhat of an esoteric topic in that it doesn't get discussed much. Nor does it measure up. We don't necessarily ghosts are interesting, but they don't necessarily show up in our modern everyday conversation. And I think a lot of that has to do with our Western mindset that I want evidence. Like this gentleman was talking about. He says, okay, this accusation is talking about something that happened 40 years ago. Where's the evidence? And so, that's to some point, that's a valid complaint, a valid statement. But I do respect the difficulty in coming forward and making those kinds of accusations for women, regardless of the truth of the matter. We have another caller. Let's see what they want to say. Hello, caller. How are you?
Okay. This woman that's making these accusations has been a heavy donor to the Hillary Clinton campaign. She's a feminist. She worked as a psychologist, and she was doing research for the company that makes the abortion pill, the RU-486 abortion pill.
So in what way, just let me stop you right there, in what way do any of those particular ideas discredit her accusation?
To stop the nomination of someone she fears will take out the abortion option.
So you believe, so let me say if I'm understanding you correctly, you believe that her primary purpose is to thwart the Kavanaugh nomination because of its
She's
threat.
a Democrat operative, need I say more?
Okay, all right, I suppose that's a possibility.
I think it's the probability. I think that they have plausible deniability in all of this stuff. I don't think she'll ever get a perjury charge.
Why would she ask for an investigation from the FBI if she didn't
Because
believe
that
that there
will
was a
slow it
possibility
down.
of
That-
something being found?
Because these filthy Democrats want this to go past the election so that they may have a chance of appointing this new Supreme Court nominee. They
Well,
are just
you know,
proof.
the Democrats got screwed out of the last nomination they were eligible to do. So
That's politics. That's politics. I guess it's going to get nastier and rottener all the time. And I think the Republicans are going to need to take off the gloves. And these Democrats play
I don't see anybody wearing gloves in today's politics, to be perfectly honest.
Well, I would say if you take the time to notice and observe, it's always the Democrats that are doing these dirty, rotten tricks. Whatever accomplishes their end, is the means is okay, you know. That's my opinion on it. But we diverged here. I wanted to talk about your statement about there being no scientific evidence about life after death.
Okay.
Have you read this recent study in Germany where they actually took volunteers to be put to death?
Now, is this the Berlin Technical Institute?
I'm not sure where it was. I'd have to look it up. But,
Yeah, one of our callers was talking about that the Berlin Technical Institute was doing that kind of research in Germany.
Well, they would put these guys into clinical death and then somehow bring them back again. And they brought all of them back, and every one of them had the classical near-death experiences of being cognizant, being understanding of what was going on, and being able to see things that they shouldn't have been able to see from their unconscious state.
Okay. So, in that regard, so they were brought back to life. They had this outside of life experience. What would have happened had they not been brought back?
They would have died.
Right, they would have died, and then if they have this living entity, if you will, that sees things they normally, when they get back in their body.
By the way, I have experienced that. I've had a 12-gauge shotgun go through my body from about a foot away.
Ow!
And I did.
You sound pretty good.
Well, most people don't know the seriousness of the injuries I suffered, but
So, do you want to share your story a little bit or not?
I'll say this much.
Okay.
I left my body. I entered into a tunnel that had a light at the end of it. Understood immediately what it was, and was reversed in the tunnel when I expressed my desire, not through, I guess, you just think it and it's there.
Okay.
That I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to be dead.
Okay. So you didn't.
When I was back on the ground, struggling with the wounds I had
Right.
by myself in the middle of nowhere. I'm probably 120, 30, 40 miles from the nearest hospital.
Wow. So a lot of people in that experience, from what I know, they generally go through the tunnel and they have some sort of meeting where they get their life showed to them. Did you get
That
that?
never happened to me.
Never
I didn't
happened,
go that
okay.
far.
Okay,
I didn't go that far.
fair enough. Yeah.
I understood immediately what was going on. I'd read many books about it prior to that.
What was your feeling? I mean, a lot of people express very specific kinds of emotions.
A kind of a comfort, but kind of a fear for me because I wasn't ready to go. I didn't want to go.
What was it, just maybe, I don't want to be personal, and you can shut me down when you want, but what was it that motivated you to not want to go?
Didn't feel like my life was
They're
complete.
revolting against themselves.
Okay. All right, that's fair enough. Yeah, usually there's some sort of purpose, unfinished business.
I hadn't had any children. I had children after that.
Okay. That's a powerful motivator. Yeah.
My first wife left shortly thereafter, and because she wasn't able to have any.
I'm sorry. What? Yeah. So, do you believe in ghosts? Do you believe in? I mean, you believe obviously in a life after death. Do you believe that people
I
remaining
believe
here?
some people don't. I believe some people don't leave the plane. I experienced a frequency change.
Oh, okay. I've heard that term before. I've heard it described that way before.
Well, I could hear the frequency change. It was like a hum that increased in frequency as I left the body.
Wow.
And then I think that you do cross through what would you call it? Some people would call it a veil, I guess. I don't know what you would call it.
Something. Yeah. Okay.
A division between this life and another, and I think some spirits don't cross that.
Okay.
So they're just left in limbo land here.
Do you think that they would be able to? What do you think prevents that? Is there any idea about why someone wouldn't necessarily be able to cross through this veil or this boundary?
Maybe a punishment. I don't know.
Huh. Yeah, that's a possibility. How did you
Maybe-
survive?
maybe-
Just going back to kind of the real story there about, I mean, now you wake up, now you're laying on the ground with your wounds. What happened? Don't leave us hanging. How'd you get out of that predicament?
I got in my truck and drove to a ranch house. I was out in the boonies up in Wyoming by kind of about 40 miles south of Pinedale, Wyoming.
Okay. Was it an accident? Did you stumble? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, my shotgun fell down and went off.
Yep. All
Had
right.
a charge in it.
Yep.
It wasn't one of those non-existent charges.
Yeah, I was cleaning it. I saw a picture of a guy with a bow and arrow. He's standing next to a guy, and the arrow's sticking out of the guy, and he's looking at him, and he goes, "I'm sorry, I was cleaning it. It went off. I didn't know it was loaded."
Well, this is quite a story. I don't know if I want to share it here because
Fair enough. Yeah.
and I would probably tell it to you, but I know there's people out there that would make fun of me because
Right.
it's happened before.
Yeah, that's the nature of there's always somebody out there who does that. I don't know. It's just the nature of human behavior. And so you're right. I mean, I don't think it's...
Well, there happened to be a paramedic at the ranch I made it to.
Oh, okay.
On his vacation from Los Angeles, California, where he dealt on an elite team there that dealt with gunshot wounds.
Wow. That's a synchronicity.
and there also happened to be a helicopter nearby fighting a fire.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So there was a lot of that connection that, you didn't want to go and you had a reason not to go, and a lot of these things fell into place so that you didn't end up going whether you wanted to or not.
Yeah, I had my right wrist blown out, was hanging by the tendons,
Mm.
and went into my chest and entered my heart and collapsed one of my lungs.
Wow. How old were you when
Yep.
that happened?
38.
Okay. Yeah, I've had I've had situations that could have killed me if they'd gone, 1 second either way. But I've never been critically injured. I've never had a near-death experience.
I remember one thing when it was like one of those, I guess they called them a Huey, Vietnam era helicopter, but I never could see it because you lose your eyesight. The last thing to go is your hearing.
Okay.
The last thing to go is your hearing. And I was hearing these doctors talking, saying that they didn't think I was going to make it. Did he get something for his heart to pump? They said there's probably less than a quart of blood left in him.
Wow. That's kind of scary.
Yeah.
I read a story about an individual by the name of Douglas Bader. It's a great book called Reach for the Sky. He lost his legs in a plane crash, and he was in the room, and he could feel himself slipping away. He could, like you were talking about, there you kind of have this process, the last thing of which is your hearing. And
Well, that was after I'd been administered to by the paramedic. When I was by myself out there, it was just boom, realizing what happened, getting out, trying to stop the bleeding, wrapping a cord around my wrist.
Yep.
Little did I know that there was my carotid artery was punctured. It was bleeding all down there, and then I remember just that frequency of zzz, like that, hearing a frequency thing, and then falling, and then going in the tunnel.
wow.
And then coming back the tunnel and back onto the body that was on the ground in the hot sand.
Well, that's
Yeah,
what
I
he
phoned
heard
and
somebody say, "Hey, be quiet. The boy in the other room is dying." And he remembered hearing that and saying, "No, I'm not. I don't want to." And he said, "I did everything I could to not die, to hang on. That I didn't want to die, and I came back and, I came away from whatever he was doing, whatever was going on. Because
This
just
is that
like you,
other-
he didn't want to."
Well, yeah, I ended up having a wrist. They took bones out of my leg and rebuilt my wrist, and just like a fused wrist now, but still functional. The
Yeah,
hand can
well,
grip.
Yeah, you're pretty lucky, it sounds like.
Yeah.
That's no small thing. I'm glad you made it. It's great to hear that you were able to have a life and you were able to contribute and accomplish things. I mean, that's really what we all want to do as human beings, is to be useful and to have a purpose of some kind, whatever it might be.
All right. Well, yeah, you're not going to convince me that there's not such a thing as ghosts. I've had some things happen to me that I can't explain them. I remember one time in the middle of winter having somebody come to the door and then or something, and then disappear when I didn't have it.
Wow.
Are you there?
I'm still here. Yep.
And I went to the snow. It was snowing at the time, to see where the footprints were and where they were leading to. I didn't find any footprints.
Yeah, that's a very common ghost
And
experience.
then, another time, this house was kind of a haunted house I lived in.
Okay.
Sometimes the lights would come on by themselves, like somebody flipped the switch on it.
Interesting.
A lot of weird things happen there, but
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, a lot of the individuals who talk about ghosts or hunt ghosts or talk about that electromagnetic frequency sort of thing that ghosts seem to, you can detect them apparently by if you can measure changes in the electromagnetic field. That specific, measurable changes that weren't there before tend to indicate the ghosts in that area.
after I had that near-death experience, it seemed like I now have dreams on occasion that are pertinent to something that's going to happen in the future. And I wouldn't say it happens a lot, but I've had a couple instances
Okay.
where I saw something in a dream that ended up happening shortly thereafter.
A lot of
Like,
people share
I
that.
had two cousins who died within a month of me having a dream of their father coming to get us all, and I escaped him.
Wow.
I
You know,
escaped him,
that's
and
not
he
even,
got them, and they died. They died about a month later.
that people who have near-death experiences have come out from the other side, and they seem to have a sensitivity to that sort of thing. This connection with the other side, or an unseen connection. Kind of like perhaps you have a little bit of that with your, I don't know what you call it, the dreams, the precognition maybe.
Yeah,
I've never had, like I said, I've never had that
maybe
experience.
just a lucky coincidence. I don't know.
Well, yeah, and that's always a possibility that synchronicity, I kind of believe, I call synchronicity divine fingerprints. Coincidences are God's fingerprints. That we...
All right, well, I'll
Yeah.
leave it for somebody else here.
Okay, well, thank you for calling. It's a great... I'm glad you were able to share what you wanted, as much as you did.
All right.
Yeah, thank you very much. We're going to see a little bit of a break. Stand by. Nope. No break for me. So we got another caller. Let's see what they got to say. Push that button. Push that button. And push that button. Hello, caller. How are you?
Hello?
Hello.
Hey,
I got you. Who dis?
Are we on the air?
We're on the air.
Oh, okay.
I got you.
Yeah, I'm just calling in to talk about a ghost hunt that we went on once.
Oh yeah. Because that, we have. I was going to talk a little bit about that, but sure. Let's get started. Tell us your story.
Yeah, so I have a team, Outer Darkness Paranormal.
Okay.
That, we go out and do some ghost hunting, and it was on private property, and there was a basement that we went down into, and there was this door, and it was really hard to open. And we finally got it open, and we got in there. It was kind of a creepy room. There was like these giant sinks in the center of it, kind of overflowing with water. And I look up on the wall, and I kid you not, it said 666 Stan.
That's kind of creepy.
I mean, serious. But really, no. I mean,
that was just one of the experiences there on that hunt. So I mean, we had other experiences, EVPs. We caught some good orbs, and anyone can go check those out on our website at www.odparanormal.com.
Okay, yeah. I think that's a big, why do you think orbs of all as a rep, why does that, are we just little circles after we die? What's that all about?
You know what? I really don't know as far as the orb. I mean, most of it that, a lot of people claim is an orb, it's a lot of dust, reflection, stuff like that.
Yeah, I was looking at some of the physics of, what do they call that, of lenses. And that particularly with flash photography, you're going to get orbs just by the physics of the type of lens you're using.
Mm-hmm.
And you can look at a photo, and if you can measure the orb sizes, and you can tell the focal point of the lens based on the orb distribution. And it's really, you have to blow it up really to get these measurements, but it definitely can by doing that you can extract the extraneous stuff and maybe actually find an orb that is outside of what you would expect from the physics.
And that's kind of what I look for in that. It's kind of its own entity. Like it moves differently. You can see the dust and stuff flying in, but this thing's moving,
against the grain, against the breeze.
Yeah, and doing different things. And that's what I usually look for.
Okay. So what is if we live after life, after this life, why wouldn't we just go through like the last caller talked about this boundary, this veil, what he couldn't describe it, but what prevents people from going through that boundary, do you think?
I mean, I'm not really sure what you're meaning by boundary, but I guess my thought on death is the physical form of us, I guess, dies, but I believe it's an energy. That's what I believe.
Okay. He used the term a veil, and it's kind of a loaded term in this religious culture. From this life to the next. So why wouldn't a ghost cross over is the term that a lot of people use. What keeps them here? Do you have an idea?
I really have not really thought about that as far as what keeps them here or what, I don't know.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking the question. I don't know either. If we have anybody who knows or has got an idea, give us a call, 801-254-1640. But, yeah, because I've had my own little experiences, and I couldn't necessarily, in a scientific, I couldn't recreate the experiment. I mean, I couldn't go back to that location and listen for footprints. You know what I mean? I wouldn't be able to. It wouldn't be measurable in a scientific way. I might be able, it may happen if I were there, but it's not something that you can, in a scientific way, it's not something that you can recreate under the same circumstances.
Yeah, for sure.
That's the challenge, I think, with ghost hunting is you're like, we set up all the same equipment, all the same stuff, but we get different experiences each location.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're going to have that. I mean, I don't think any one location is going to be the same. I unless you really have like some kind of crazy ghost that follows you. You know what I mean?
Okay.
But I think each place has its own, I don't know, maybe story. You know.
Well, that poses the question: what makes what makes locations different, just from your experience?
Different. You know, I mean, I guess in the fear, creepy factor, you know, obviously, you know, places of, you know, great pain and suffering, you know, and cruelty and stuff like that. I feel that negative energy. Maybe that's, you know, an answer to the previous question, is the negative energy is what makes them stay behind.
Okay.
But
all right. Now you go into
you
a
know,
place knowing kind of the history of the location, right?
Yeah, I try to gather as much information as we can about the location, you know, to see, you know, what other people have experienced, and then we just go in and, you know, see if we can get those same experiences or try to debunk them or whatnot. But
have you had anyone try to buffalo you in your investigations? Like say, okay, this place is haunted, but it turns out to be they're just yanking your chain?
no, all the ones that I've been on, well, maybe. But, you know, kind of thinking back.
That in the
'Cause
UFO world, that is not an uncommon process. When it's similar in that you can't, it's hard to recreate the experience under the same circumstances. And so some of it is that people are just trying to yank your chain. So I was wondering if it showed up in this type of investigation as well.
The ones that I've personally been on, I don't feel that I mean, a lot of it, I mean, there was no way that they really yank our chain. I mean, they were kind of random places.
Okay.
Started out. But as far as, you know, dealing with other people and, you know, the private property and, you know, some public places, you know, I don't think I've ever thought that they've, you know, tried to pull one over on us.
Okay. What about, so we talked a little bit about different locations. What different kind of ghosts have you dealt with? Have you actually stumbled across ghosts, and are there different kinds?
Of ghosts?
Yeah, or is it all the same?
mean,
if you get evidence, if you get experience of that.
I guess, you know, experience and whatever. I really couldn't say. I mean, as far as a good ghost or a bad ghost, you know, I don't believe that. I just think it's energy that's there. And you watch these shows on TV like Ghost Adventures, and it's just like, you know, they're just ramping it up for ratings, you know.
Okay, yeah, that's the snake oil salesman. I see.
Yeah, I mean, I've never ever personally been out on a, you know, ghost hunt or whatever and been like, I'm possessed. You know, I don't get it. I really don't.
Now they talk about, have you ever had an entity follow you home or stick with you? They say that's not an uncommon experience for individuals who do that sort of thing.
I don't know. I can't really say one way or the other if something's followed us back home or, you know, because like I said, I think each place is unique, but.
Okay.
I mean, there's been places, you know, that we've been that there's like similar things, but.
Have you seen any what they call apparitions? That's kind of the granddaddy of them all. If you were a ghost hunter, that would be what you'd want to find, right?
Exactly. I mean, that's like the holy grail all of it, but I personally, I've seen, something with my eyes. Unfortunately, I didn't have a camera or, a recording at the time. This was something that happened way back in my, early 20s.
Was it a ghost
I think
hunt, or were you just
This
trundling
was just
along?
no, it was just at home,
Okay, you got to tell the story. You got to tell the ghost story.
Okay, I'll tell you the ghost story. So, anyways, me and my buddy we're down in the basement, playing computer games, and it was like a big dark orb. I mean, it was like basketball sized. It shot across the room, and when it hit the wall, it knocked like the clock and the shelves, and it was kind of. I was like more amazed than I was scared. I look over at my buddy and he's like, "Did you see that?" And he's like, "I did." And I guess it was more of a thrill, the adrenaline.
Okay.
Yeah. That's kind of what I, go out and, obviously I want to catch evidence, but.
Yeah. I wonder, that's a fascinating story. What do you think? Do you think what was going on created that experience? I mean, with ghosts or the paranormal, there's usually some sort of causality. It's like railroad crossings. You don't
like
was your
like what was going on at that point in our life?
yeah?
Or,
Did they have a witch burned in your basement?
I don't think so.
Okay, all right.
I mean,
yeah.
the house was built. It was built before we moved into it. So.
All right. Well, that's it. Yeah, that is an interesting story about, because you saw physical manifestation. Things actually moving around. Something knocked the clock off the wall. That's no small thing.
Yeah.
Because you generally, the debunkers, those who really are ardent disbelievers, say that, well, all of the things you're talking about, there are no physical measurable data, and yet you had the experience. Now the challenge is, could you set up a bunch of monitoring equipment and have it happen again? That seems to be the bugbear of
the
ghost
real
hunting.
question. It's like, when will that ever happen again? And unfortunately, it's more without the equipment than not, or so.
Right, your camera, the lens caps on your camera or something.
Or but I mean, it's not necessarily we're out on a hunt. It's just some random things happen,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't have your equipment. It's not you're not expecting it, but it happens.
So have you and your friends spoken about that experience since then?
I haven't talked to him probably in a year or so.
Okay.
No, we haven't really talked about it.
All right. Because sometimes that's an interesting, is like the different perceptions of experience that, two individuals have, even though they experience the same thing. Sometimes how they remember it is different.
Yeah.
So where do you see Oh, go ahead.
What's that? I was just going to say, I had another experience, and it was with another friend. We were renting a room, and, just out of high school, and we shared a room, separate beds, and one night he woke up screaming, "No, you'll squish me." And I was having this dream that I was driving a dump truck.
Oh, wow.
And I was dumping rocks, and he was the one backing me up. And it was weird.
That you were connecting in the same dream. That's interesting.
Yeah. I don't know what it is. I don't know what the odds are that we were having the same dream, but
That is a interesting. I remember when I worked at the hospital as a security person. People who were a danger to themselves or others, we would be assigned to kind of stay in the general vicinity and make sure they didn't hurt themselves or others. And so I'm on one side of the emergency room dealing with a person who's in that condition. And my partner, another one of the officers, is on the other side of the emergency room. So we can't hear each other or connect. But my guy is having a one-sided conversation in the room. And it turns out that on the other side of the ER, the officer who was watching him, that individual was having a one-sided conversation. And when we got together and started talking about our experience, it turned out that they were having a conversation between each other. Even though they were far enough away, they couldn't have heard each other or seen each other, which was kind of an interesting, perhaps something about the condition that they were in made that possible. You know, that like your dream was kind of a connection. Which is cool. What do you see? So what is your you said the Holy Grail is the apparition sort of experience. Are you still looking for that?
Oh yeah, for sure. You know, I mean, I think I'll keep doing it. You know, as a side gig here for now, for probably till I die. You know, it's just, but I would really like to get something, you know, where I could see it form, or an actual, you know, figure, or actually see something move or fall, or, you know, that's just, I guess that's just what excites me. So
yeah, it's like my friend who'd fallen asleep in the theater at the U. I think it was Kingsbury Hall. And he woke, and somebody poked him and told him to wake up, and it's this old lady sitting next to him. And he freaked out and was putting his lunch back in his bag and looked up to apologize because he was terrified that he'd been caught sleeping on duty, and there was nobody there. And, you know, it was in a theater, so there's no way that she would have been able to exit without him seeing her walk away. And so he would never go back in that building again after that experience.
That's crazy. But that would be what draws me to that building, you know. That's, I guess we're two different people. Right.
And that, some people, you know, like my experience is like, okay, you know, I heard the footsteps, follow it to a dead end, there's nobody there. Like, okay, I get it. Okay, ghost, I'm not bothering you, please don't bother me. You know, I've got to be down here in this creepy basement doing this job. You know, I'm not, like I said, I'm not going to bother you. Leave me alone.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. He didn't seem to bother me again. And that's what they told me. They said, oh, yeah, this is the most haunted building in Utah. Nobody comes down here without having some sort of experience. It's the basement of the Union Pacific building. I think they're moving that museum, but I'm sure it's interesting how trains and train stations seems to have a lot of paranormal sort of stuff go along with them. Theaters are like that too.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Well, Dr. Grimmy, I'm just going to say, I'm going to let you go and let some other callers give you a call.
All right.
But, just remember, guys, you can find us on Facebook at Outer Darkness Paranormal, or at our website, www.odparanormal.com.
Yeah, if you've got an experience that you want some equipment set up and maybe some measurements taken, these guys are the ones to call. And they usually do it for just cookies and coffee, right? All right. Well, cookies and coffee. So yeah, great stuff. There's a lot of people out there who are, I don't know, what's the term I'm looking for? Ghost hunters. That's the term. that it's a fascinating, what you call it, experience, a phenomena. Maybe that's a better way of describing it, because it is, phenomena being something that occurs outside of of what is expected. So we're gonna. Found a guy who has a great ghost story, and I want to play it and then talk about it. So give me a minute to pull it up. This guy, his name is Mr. Bobby Lee. So we're gonna play his ghost story, and then talk about some of the similarities with his story and ghost stories in general. Some of these the markers of a ghost story.
Ghost story, UFO encounter, unexplainable shit, whatever you got.
Well, my brother and I have talked about this because my brother has his own YouTube channel and whatnot. It's called The Stevie Weeby Show. And my brother and I grew up in a town called Poway, California. What's going on?
Just need some water, sorry.
Okay.
I'm parched.
And we know that half of our house was on some sort of Indian burial site.
That's his
Because my
classic.
brother and I would hear demons, we'd see demons.
Collectively, you would both hear the same thing.
And what my dad said later in life was, he said to us one day, he goes, I don't believe in a ghost, but every time I park my car after work, I run through the hallway because I feel weird.
Really?
He felt, but that's where my brother and I's bedrooms were.
He just left you in
Yeah,
the
so he
trenches
just
with all the
left us
ghosts
in the fucking
running
ghost-
past
Yeah,
your
yeah.
bedroom.
But my dad would run past our bedroom.
You used to see your own dad running.
Yeah, because of the fact that he felt an evil presence there. In fact, one day I thought I was possessed, and for me to get out of it, I jumped into the swimming pool. Yeah, we had a swimming pool. We did pretty good in life.
Killer.
But yeah,
Not good enough to get an unhaunted house.
Yeah, then when we moved out and it stopped. But my brother and I were both possessed several times. We felt.
How did you know you were possessed?
Because we felt a demon. Like we would hear things, and there were times when we would be asleep but awake, and we couldn't move, and we felt this presence. And it's never happened after.
You
or
jumped out of a
before that.
window into the pool?
No, we had one floor.
Okay.
But I would run out of my bedroom one time, and I fucking jumped in the swimming
Did it
pool, and I
work?
got out of it. Yeah, I got out of it. Yeah.
Oh my
But
God.
yeah, we were. There was some sort of evil presence.
Have
there.
you felt anything like that since then?
Well, at the Comedy Store, you know that place is haunted.
I haven't heard
And I
that.
saw Gus a couple of times.
Was that a ghost that lived
Yeah,
there?
there was a ghost named Gus. He was in the 50s, he was a mafia henchman that apparently was murdered at the Comedy Store. It was a club called Ciro's at the time. And I've seen Gus a couple of times.
God bless him.
And
What
that's
do you- what
something
do you-
that other people have seen there?
Oh, Gus levitated Sam Kinison by his ankle and above it. Because, Sam Kinison and Carl LeBeau, when they moved from Houston to the Comedy Store, they used to sleep in the main room. And one night, and this is what I heard from Carl LeBeau, because obviously Sam Kinison is dead, that one night he woke up and that Sam Kinison was levitated by his ankle upside down. Yeah.
Huh?
I could tell, next, if I ever do this podcast again, I can tell you a million stories that happened there.
Really?
Yeah.
So
But we've been 2 hours deep.
When
and
you
I'm
saw
hungry.
the ghost, just out of curiosity, how did it?
Me and my
appear
friend
before
Johnny
you?
Sanchez did a gig in Bakersfield. This is back in the 90s. And I parked my truck at the Comedy Store parking lot. At 4 in the morning, when Johnny dropped me back off at my car, we looked up, and there's a window on the top floor. We looked up, and we saw a faceless man wearing a top hat with his hands against the window looking at
Yikes.
us. And then we looked at each other, screamed. We looked back up. He was gone.
So that was a ghost story. What do you think? A true story or not? Give us your opinion, 801-254-1640. It had some of the elements of a lot of different stories, but the reason I brought it up is it had some stuff that perhaps was outside of what we've talked about. when we talk about ghosts and ghost experience and experiences that people have. So, moving right along. We keep hearing about this Berlin Technical Institute killing people, as it were, or putting them to death and bringing them back to life. Don't know the whole story of that because it's the first I've heard of it, but it sounds like a great movie. And I hope I'm not getting put together with, if I'm not getting, I lost my train of thought. So moving right along. Ghosts in Judaism and Christianity. Christianity in general. There's some very specific concepts and ideas about ghosts, and this ghost story kind of emphasizes that Mr. Lee talked about, is that he described experiences that were perhaps not ghost-like, that they were more along the lines of what Christianity or evangelical Christianity might have understood. The first, in the Bible, the first thing we talk about ghost, we see the book of Samuel, we see Samuel, we see Saul. Samuel has died. Saul has violated he's a sinner, if you will. And he believes that God has left him, and he really wants to talk to Samuel. And so he goes to a witch, the Witch of Endor, to try and get some information about what's going to happen in the future, because in the next couple of days, there's a great battle he's to be involved in. And so he wants to find out from Samuel, who had the ability to talk to God or to tell him the future. See, that's kind of a dynamic when we talk about prophets and prophetic calling. It's perhaps in those days it was different than what we perhaps think of today. So he goes to the Witch of Endor, Saul does, to call up Samuel and to get some information, to get what's going to happen in the future, to get some divination. So he goes to the Witch of Endor, and she kind of gets upset because it is illegal under the Levitical code to be a witch, to practice divinatory arts. And so he talks to her and convinces her that, listen, I'm not going to put you to death. I'm not going to arrest you. Here's a bag of gold, whatever he did. But I really need to talk to Samuel. And so she begins her ritual. Now, what we kind of get from the text is that the Witch of Endor isn't a real witch in the sense that she has supernatural powers. Saul doesn't get that. He goes thinking that she does. But what happens is that she goes through her thing, and the apparition, the spirit of Samuel appears, and the Witch of Endor kind of gets upset, freaks out, is frightened by what happens. Now, in this experience, Saul can hear the voice of Samuel, but he can't see Samuel, and the Witch of Endor, the person with the familiar spirit, can see Samuel but can't hear him, or can hear him but can't see, or can see Samuel but not hear him. There's a distinction between the doer and the receiver, the doer and the doee of that experience, that carries over in later epics of the nature of this mediumship. And what this medium is doing, this connector with the dead, is necromancy, is getting information from the dead. So that's the first, the ghost of Samuel, his spirit of Samuel shows up. And so it's the first time we see the term witch, and it's kind of the first time we see the term ghost in the sense of a spirit of the dead comes back to talk and to give information. Of course, he tells him, you're screwed, Saul. So there is this idea of a spirit living after life, that God breathed life into Adam, and that life, that spirit, that ruach, the breath of life, continues after the death of the body. So the Christian denominations have this idea that yes, there are ghosts, there are spirits, but it's a kind of a broad brush, is that some denominations believe that this spirit, a child of God, if you will, continues on after death, but may wait here on the earth prior to that, perhaps attending the funeral. I mean, when we're talking about this, I think a lot of what we're talking about is folklore, not necessarily doctrine. There are perhaps, and we'll talk about Mormon theology and ghosts here in a little bit, where the dead can return and speak to the living to give warnings or instruction. But within the Christian realm, within the Christian view of the world, what we find is that we have this idea of the demon, of demons. Now, the term demon comes from the Greek word daemon, which means divinity. Everyone had a daemon that inspired them to do what it was ever that they did better. And in order to do whatever you were do, whether you were a saddle maker or a poet or a philosopher, you needed to be able to be in touch with this spiritual being that gave you knowledge that was beyond your normal ability. And some people had better daemons than others. You can kind of see why when Christianity began to spread in the Greek world, how that would by default be something that they would oppose, because only, there was this idea of God being the center of the universe, and the only way to be good is to be connected with God and not rely on any other types of or sources of information. So this term daemon becomes what we know today as demon, and the Christian view is that these daemons are actually the spirits that were cast out of heaven. In the book of Job, it talks about the third of the host of heaven was cast out and is on the earth, living and causing grief for humans, opposing God's plan. Again, we're looking at it from a Christian viewpoint. And the argument that what we get is the idea that demons are ghosts, or the representation of ghosts that we're talking about are only demons in disguise. So that's an interesting, possibility. Some denominations, the spirit or ghosts, that the soul is a very unique thing, and would not act as a ghost. The primary view is that the dead return to heaven. They don't remain on the earth. And that any representation of what we call ghost-like activity is this demonic or daemon activity, and it to for whatever motives they might have, thwart our effort to thwart us from being righteous or good or whatever that might be. This is the philosophy that covers this idea of ghosts is called dualism. Is the idea that there is a form of matter that is separate from the physical, but that is coexistent with it, and that is known as dualism. That is some people argue that dualism is not a valid philosophical view. And opposed to that is the philosophical argument of monism, is that that spirit, that our existence is, there is no separation of spirit and body. We are all the same in that regard, and we don't exist separately. And there are lots of people, I'm not going to get into a discussion of the argument between dualism and monism, just to say that ghosts fall under the philosophy of dualism in that argument, in that viewpoint. Ghosts exist all over the world, and I've kind of talked about the Western tradition of the idea of ghost, kind of from ancient Greek views and that sort of thing. Fundamentally, most of the idea of the ghost, and I kind of believe this as an anthropologist, comes back to this ancestor worship, to this idea that if you are moving and alive and breathing while you're alive, then you may not have the physical body to do that, but there is some remnant that does that you can't see, and that you have to appease, put out the little gold coins on the eyes and that sort of thing that you see in some of the funerary arrangements. And that much of our funerary practices deal with this idea of appeasing the dead, or creating an environment that matches our philosophical religious views. In Utah, it is not uncommon to be buried facing the east. And the only argument is that when the resurrection occurs, that the second coming will be seen to be coming from the east, and that it's always kind of nice. You don't have to stand up and turn around. I'm not sure why that would bother anybody, but it seems to be a thing. And this idea of ghosts, this idea of the spirit, we've been telling stories about it. We got my favorite ghost story, probably the first ghost story that actually mattered, was A Christmas Carol. Because Scrooge gets taken by the three ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future, and he is not seen, and he's able to observe things that are happening. So he, in many ways, functions as a ghost, just as the ghosts that he is experiencing, though they have a little more power and oomph about them than what we would have talked about in ghostliness, though I think that was more an effort on the teller of the tale than actual dynamics of ghosts, or trying to portray ghosts in an accurate sense. It was a mechanical story process that Charles Dickens used for his story to work. With that said, I want to talk about a little bit more. I want to talk about haunted places in Utah. We talked about the idea of haunting as a place where ghosts hang out. Now, if you want to join the conversation, I'm at 801-254-1640. If you have any questions, if you got a good ghost story or a ghost experience, share it with us. I'm going to go through a listing that I found on the interwebs of haunted places in Utah. So haunted, the idea of ghosts being there, haunting, in other words, just being around a particular place as a spiritual being or a spiritual entity, and explanations of some of the manifestations of what that looks like. And we'll look at some of these things, and we're going to then maybe discuss some of the common threads that when we talk about ghosts and hauntings, we tend to see some of similar stuff. Like I mentioned, sounds, people hear things, they hear footsteps like I did, they hear pianos playing, they hear music, they hear voices. They see things move, doorways opening and closing, things being moved around that wouldn't be expected to normally be moved around. Apparitions, either mists or physical beings or orbs, as one caller talked about, seen moving around in an intelligent manner. And we have the hardcore ghost stories of the White Lady, generally a representation of death. In many cases, the story is that the individual haunts a specific place for usually a specific reason, lost love, lost child, lost something, and is bound to the place due to that loss. And if you see this White Lady, it's usually an omen or a portent of death, kind of a thread related to the banshee, that the screeching of the woman spirit who collects the dead in Irish folklore. That is such a scary thing. The movie Darby O'Gill and the Little People has a terrifying. I was a little boy when I saw that, and it just scared the bejesus out of me. About the banshee coming to collect Darby and his friend, the Little People, helping him out so that he wasn't carried away by this fae. I did a show on the fae, and the banshee was one of these creatures, portent of death, that kind of came out of this idea of this ancient earth religion in early Bronze Age British Isles. So I want to talk about some stuff about haunted places in Utah. And if you have any ideas about what places in Utah are haunted, give me a call, 801-254-1640. I want to hear your story and talk about it. Tell us what you got to say, and let's see if there's some similarities between other stories that are out there. So, haunted places in Utah, and I'm just going to go down this list that I found. They're all over Utah. If you have had experiences with some of these places I'm going to talk about, please do give me a call, because it would be interesting to hear an anecdotal verification of this story. I don't know. I can't argue about the quality of the source, other than they make this claim. American Fork Canyon apparently is a haunted place that if you do 3 circles at the top of Tibble Fork parking lot, you will come to the fork when exiting the canyon, and a hearse will follow you and chase you with red lights. Okay. That's a pretty powerful experience. I don't know if that'll be the case, but I bet you there's been a lot of people driving around the parking lot, not the least of which would get you chased by red lights. Bear River City, Crybaby Bridge. A lady took her 2 kids out for a drive. She felt the devil was possessing her to kill her children. She was going over the bridge and drove off of it, killing her and her offspring. The witnesses have said that if you sit on the bridge with your windows rolled down and honking your horn 3 times, you can hear the tykes yelling, "Don't do it, mother," wanting them, to try and save you. The challenge, this is not an uncommon practice. You go look in the mirror late at night and say Bloody Mary 3 times. This 3-time repetition of 3 times is a very common folkloric method of magic. So I'm not sure if this is a ghost story or just a bunch of kids, because it does seem to take root in that mindset. Voodoo Caves, an old underground pipe with satanic writing that ran water into the river. A worker was unclogging the pipe after it was all dried up, and then the water started to flow again. He got pinned down and drowned. Word is, if there is any satanic threats in the cave, the water will start back up again, and there's no way out once it starts. Lots of witnesses. I'm not the kind of guy who likes to creep around old pipes at night. I'll just say that. That gives me the chills just thinking about it. What a great story. The Voodoo Caves at Beaver Dam. So I guess in Beaver, Utah. I don't know I'm not responsible if you decide to go into these places and get drowned. Just qualify that this is for informational purposes only. Don't do this at home. Benjamin, Utah, an old Arrowhead swimming resort. In the late 70s, a 6-year-old boy drowned in the pool, and some family members of the owner and guests have said that they have seen the shadow of a boy as well as a green mist on the stairs in one of the upstairs bedrooms. If you are awake around 1 in the morning, you are able to hear several soft voices. In the 2 downstairs bedrooms, there have been sightings, an old woman and a very unpleasant presence. Some also tell of a ghost cat that wanders around the back of the house near the place that the cat was buried. Never seen a ghost cat. I've actually, the funny thing is I've always wondered if my cat was ghosting me wandering around after he passed away. He was eaten by a big dog. That perhaps he was still hanging out with me. Again in Benjamin, this is, I guess this is alphabetical. The pump house. There is an old pump house in Benjamin. I guess there is a Benjamin, Utah. It was used to regulate the irrigation flow to farmers. It is said that there were 2 workers, one working alone, and one of the men got caught in one of the machines, got pulled in and died. The other man tried to pull him out, got his arm caught, and died of loss of blood. They don't use the pump house anymore, and all the electricity to this place has been turned off. But when driving by after dark almost every night, through the cracks in the boarded-up windows, you can see light shining through, generated from an unknown source. Upon approaching the house, you can hear people talking, music playing in the background, but no one is inside. Authorities have been called by numerous residents claiming there are trespassers. But there is no one and no evidence of entry. That's a common ghost story. Lots of elements there of ghostliness. And old buildings tend to attract these kinds of stories, whether they're true or not. Isolated old buildings seem to get accused of being haunted, be that as it may. So we're moving right along to Bountiful. Bountiful Cemetery. Voices heard in the old wood cemetery. And I don't know if there's what that means. If it means that there's a portion of the cemetery that the headstones are made of wood, or if there's a tree-covered part. Strange smells and sounds, and one of the tombstones is always warm, regardless of the time of year. The Haunted Museum in Bountiful, an old building on Eaglewood Drive, once used as a mortuary. It's a very common place. Again, we have this dead people thing. Many individuals who work in mortuaries talk about that there's lots of ghost-like activity. A mink farm, and most recently a museum. The museum is abandoned but still houses many LDS artifacts and has been seen with dark, shadowy people on the property and a very eerie presence felt. A lot of ghost-haunted sites. I just feel creepy. Hard to say why you feel creepy, but I guess that's always a possibility. Janitors have been known to see and talk to. Let's see, is this the same? Nope. The Barnfield Cemetery, the Haunted Museum, Viewmont High School. Ted Bundy abducted one of his victims from this high school. Reports have seen her and his yellow VW bug still exist to this day, only his VW was white, not yellow, in that they didn't make yellow in that particular time. Box Elder, Brigham City, Box Elder Middle School. In the girls' locker room, janitors and students have heard girls opening and closing lockers. That's a ghost-like behavior when no one was in there. When you go into the big gym, people have seen the girl Marie. She lives there, and the janitors are known to see and talk to her. Down the hall of the boys' locker room, you could knock on one door and it will knock back. The only way you can feel the knocking back is if you believe that she might be there. This individual ghost, Marie, has been known to run around the top of the building when girls are in the weight room. So that's an interesting ghost story. Again, if anybody's experienced with these locations or had experience at these locations, I'm just going to keep going through them because I think they're kind of fun. In Brigham City, the Dove Creek Camp. This abandoned labor camp was once used for Chinese immigrant workers that were used for laying the first transcontinental railroad tracks. It is haunted by the sounds and voices of Chinese workers who lived and died there. Ghostly lights have also been reported. Brigham City, the Idle Isle Cafe Candy Company. I don't know if this is a business or not currently. Voices and strange occurrences from the dining room have been reported. Objects fall off shelves, chairs are moved and knocked over. People have seen what they believe is to be a ghost of an old Native American man. Other businesses on Main Street also were haunted by this old Native American man. One day, a worker at the Idle Cafe, cleaning behind the soda fountain, as she stood up, a Native American man was standing at the fountain. He startled the girl since she had not heard the front door open. She asked for some dinner rolls. She wrote down his order and looked at him, asked if he wanted anything else, but he was gone. She asked everyone if they had seen him leave or come in. Nobody had. In the basement of this location, there was a candy factory. A worker was mixing ingredients one day when she felt a hand push her shoulder, causing her to step back. She turned but saw nobody. That's not an uncommon experience, is to be poked or pushed, not really heavily, but by people or things that are not there. There's also a woman who's occasionally seen roaming the factory dressed in 1940 styles clothing, that of a current owner's grandmother who died in the 60s. Again, interesting. That's a apparition, a hardcore ghost story. The old Indian schools, you can see from the freeway going through up to Brigham City. A lot of these had been purchased and have turned into apartments. So hard to say. Again, I think that falls on the abandoned building motif. The kids in the kids tend to go there. There have been, apparently there's some tunnels connecting the buildings and a belief that satanic rituals have occurred. Interesting. Another room is that's not an uncommon thread for some of these abandoned places. Speakers and lecturers brought in to speak on the subject of the college. One speaker said that northern Utah was the second in the nation among Satan worshiping among teenagers. Verified by police, there's some sort of human activity, and they warn you not to go up there. Enormous amount of cold spots. Cold spots is another ghost sort of phenomenon that ghost hunters will take temperature recording devices. One hallway that a recent ghost hunter walked down was undamaged with graffiti, but upon their second travel, all of the sheetrock walls had been ripped off and thrown on the floor. Brighton, Silver Fork Lodge and Inn. Employees complain of lights and appliances turning on and off, missing tools. That's another common thread in ghost stories is, where's my tool? Now, the challenge with that is I do that all the time. I set something down and I think it was right here. So I'm not sure if that's a ghost thing or not. Whispers and moans, cold spots, apparitions, and other paranormal activity. Byron, I don't even know, there's somewhere in Utah, there's some place called Byron. Rocky Mountain High School. Here people in the weight room, it's always empty when people go there. Someone hung themselves in the room, which is not uncommon to when an individual dies in a location to start attributing paranormal activity or to start finding paranormal activity on a location. Cedar City has several haunted sorts of places. The Depot Junction and the Godfather's Pizza. A psychic came in and said that a worker who died in the basement was still present down there, as well as some others. Workers have witnessed countless strange occurrences, noises, moaning, talking, clanking. Television gets turned on and off. They have heard a little girl crying. Lights are turned off by themselves. Piano would play by itself, and strange feelings. And lots of that is all ghost-related sorts of phenomena. Interesting that we find these common threads. Now, I wonder from a Jungian psychology standpoint, are these common threads the collective subconscious acting out or not?
Save time on.
It is hard to say. Let's listen to some commercials for a minute. Okay, let's not listen to some commercials for a minute. Well, okay, Cedar City. Let's see what else in Cedar City. The auditorium in the Southern Utah University. Quite a few spirits that haunt the auditorium theater. Now, I talked about theaters being a hotbed of paranormal activity. It's hard to say if that's because of the death or because of the high levels of emotion that go on there, but theaters always seem to have some sort of ghostly story, regardless of the theater. Clarkston, Utah, the town church. In the Ward House, the chapel is upstairs. It's been reported that after hearing the organ playing, a man ran upstairs to see who it was because he was the only one in the building. He couldn't see anybody, but the organ was being played right in front of his eyes. That's it. I talked about my experiences in the old dance building that you would hear pianos playing. Didn't actually see one playing, but that's a great story. Interesting ghost story there. Clearfield, some stuff. I'm not sure. Dugway. I've been to Dugway. The clinic, located on the U.S. Army Dugway Proving Ground, a remote Army post west of Salt Lake City, is closed to the public. I've driven past that closed clinic, going other places. Trespassers will be prosecuted under federal law. You will get in trouble sneaking into that part of the photo building of Ditto area. The building was constructed in the early 1960s. On or near the site of a German POW barracks. No indication of German ghosts, as the POWs are very well treated. However, the photo building is haunted. Most activity occurs at night or after hours when the building is quiet. Long history of this building being haunted going back 30 years or more. Running feet, indistinct whispering, unintelligible talking. No moving objects. Nothing is found. Believed of a possibility that a photographer had died in the building. Interesting. I hadn't heard that story about Dugway. Helper, Utah, the Spring Canyon White Lady. We talked about white ladies being a common ghostly sort of thing. Spring Canyon above Helper, Utah, is the site of several ghost towns, including Latuda and Standardville, which were coal mining communities. Many old homesteads built out of rock still stand, as well as stores, the old jail, and such. One of the homes is where the white lady has been seen. She's dressed all in white and is searching for her child. I talked a little bit about that. The white lady, as a motif, as a thing, generally has some sort of loss, a child or a lover, something of that nature. Very common theme with the white ladies. Her husband was killed in one of the mines. She was left alone, and her baby, the miners, did not have survivor benefits. Her child died with a sickness, and she committed suicide. She frightens many people out for walks or hunting. Interesting. Hill Air Force Base, Building 1205. Many employees have reported seeing a figure late at night roaming the halls wearing sandals. Whenever anyone tries to speak to this figure, the only reply is chanclas. They reply back chanclas. I'm not sure what that means, but could be kind of thing. In Honeyville, Crystal Hot Springs. Been there. Former worker student reports to have heard several strange noises. The main building houses are 3 different floors. Second floor is called the Blue Room, used for hosting parties. Doors shut, heard footsteps. Sounds like a standard haunting, unusual feeling, shadows where there should be none, doors opening and closing, footsteps. In Camas, South Summit Middle School, they call her the pool ghost because she died in the pool. If you were there at night swimming, she will pull you under. She has already almost killed 2 people. She haunts the pool and what is now a basketball court. Kanab, the Best Friends Sanctuary. It is an animal sanctuary, and me and my friends have seen skinwalkers, sightings of people watching you, and the temple. All of this is supposedly linked to Charles Manson. I talked a little bit about that connection on my last week's show on serial killers. Charles Manson was had some experience with, I don't know if he was directly related to, an organization known as the Process Church. This Process Church, after Manson went on his rampage, due to their connection with Charles Manson, kind of the interest in it fell off. Well, we got a caller. Let's see what they got to say. Hello, caller. How are you? Hello, caller. How are you?
Well, good. Can you hear me?
Now I can. Yeah,
Oh,
yep,
good.
We're good.
Good. Well, how you doing, Dr. Grimmy?
I'm doing okay. You know, we've had some technical difficulties. So currently, I don't have any advertisements, so I just have to yap. And it's not as easy as it looks. But I found a way. I'm going to I'm going to play some ghost stories or something so that I can go get something to drink. Talking to you guys drives a man to drink.
Yeah, you've got quite a few ghost stories there here.
Yeah,
in
I'm just
Utah.
going through the list of haunted places in Utah. We're at Camas, Kanab is where we've got to. We're in the K's. Some of these places I've been to, and have some, I know some of the history, so kind of interesting. You may bump into, as I go through these, as I get to some more common locations, you may have some experience. What ghost story do you have for us? You were telling us about were you the one talking about the Berlin Technical Institute?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
because somebody else mentioned in Germany they're killing people and bringing them back to life.
Yeah, over 900 people, and nobody permanently dead. And their brain's not damaged because they do a dialysis, keep the blood flowing.
How long are they dead per se? I mean, what is the time frame we're looking at? Are they publishing this data? I guess.
Well, I did go to the internet and I did look them up, and there are people talking about it. So I didn't get to read through it. I'm driving right now, so
Okay.
I have a Bluetooth on.
All right.
And I want to go back and read through it and find out more about it.
That I'm gonna look at that myself because I can't imagine it being legal.
No, I
but
wouldn't
you never
think
know. The
so.
Germans have a whole different view of the world.
Yes.
That German humor, it's no laughing matter.
Yes. Yeah. So I want to look into it more myself. It'd be interesting if you could do a show on it. Look into it more. And
Well, I want to do a near-death experience show. I'm negotiating with a guest, so some of that stuff, I don't know enough about it to really yap for 4 hours. So I need help.
well, I'd be interested if you could get the author of the book Proof of Heaven. Yes, Proof of Heaven. And he's a neurologist, was an atheist neurologist that went to Israel, came back, and got an E. coli, I think it was E. coli, something that just destroyed his body and his brain. And he was in a coma for a week. His brain, the pictures of his brain, it was just dead.
Wow.
And there was no activity, and they took him off life support. They didn't think he would live. But he had a whole season in heaven. He came back a believer. It kind of sounds more like Swedenborg's experiences.
Okay.
To me, it's a low level, life after this life experience. To me, it's not the higher level of saints and prophets and angels type experience. To me, it's a lower type of life experience. But he came back, and within a few weeks, he had full brain function. A few months, and he now, he wrote the book right away, and told of his experience, and now he goes around giving lectures. And being a brain surgeon, he always thought that these were electrical flashes, impulses, after images in the brain, but his brain was dead. And doctors don't know how he came back to life, because this E. coli virus it's appeared 3 times in the world, and there's no cure for it. They've been able to isolate it, and the person died that had it. But it's very aggressive. And so he talks about these. I went on the internet and listened to his experience, and he's a full believer now.
Well, that's no small thing. If it's an experience that changes your view of the world, it must have some meaning, at least for him. What did he tell about heaven? Did you read the book?
No, I just heard him tell about it, and he first told about his medical death experiences that there is no recovery from, no cure from. And, everyone dies that has what he had. But, he went to a place where there was a green field and a lot of life and a lot of intelligences down there, I would say. I forget what word he uses. And then there was music and rhythms. And he finally found out from up above, these music and rhythms was prayers. And everybody, it was, rejoicing. Everybody was drawing strength from these prayers, and there was so much love. That's all he talked about, the feeling of love over there, that everyone is loved, and I think he doesn't believe in a hell. And he actually made it up from the green field on the leaf on the wing of a butterfly with a beautiful girl, and he was adopted. And he later looked up his parents, and they later married. And he found out one of his sisters died, and he looked at the picture, and that was the girl that was on the butterfly wing with him, telling him how much he was loved.
That's a
thought.
great story.
Oh, there,
The
he talked
idea of
for
love.
hours.
I'm a crudge muggin, so I could probably use some of that, but I guess I'm going to have to wait till I'm dead.
Yeah, he was pretty depressed. He himself was. The first depression lasted a year, I think. It's because first time he tried to contact his parents, they couldn't deal with it right then. And so he felt rejected. And even though he's a neurosurgeon, he went into deep depression for a year. And then when he went into this coma with this fatal, 100% fatal bacteria, I mean, they say if it ever gets loose, it'll be way worse than the Black Plague. There's no cure for this, no treatment for this. The doctors just don't know how he survived. They went into his spine, and a whole bunch of fluid came out, and they knew he was going to be dead. But even though he took him off life support, I think four heads popped out of this field. He was down with the worms, in his depression. And 4 or 5 heads popped out, and one of them was of his son, who ran into the room and did open his eyes up, and his eyes was backwards in his head. But the son called up to him, "Don't leave me, Daddy." And that message from his son got through to him in this worm mud. That was the closest thing he came to hell, he said. It was just... yeah, he talks about people he met. He was there a whole season. Even though it was 7 days, here, he was there like for 2 or 3 months.
Okay.
A whole bunch of things happened.
Interesting.
And yeah, you can tonight or tomorrow or this week go on YouTube and listen to some of his talks about this.
Okay.
It's very powerful. Even when all the x-rays showed his brain being dead, and he had real experiences. Even with his dead sister, didn't know he had a dead sister because he was adopted, and a whole bunch of other experiences. So it's very powerful, and yeah, and I just let it go. Experience after experience on YouTube, and I listened to a whole bunch of near-death experiences.
So you've
while I'm
never
out here
had
driving
a
on the road.
near-death experience yourself?
Well, I've been dead a few times, but I just remember.
Have
I
you
don't
been moonlighting at the Berlin Technical Institute, Ray?
No.
How did you
No.
end up dead a few times, I guess would be the question.
Well, see, I don't remember the experience. One time in the 60s, I OD'd on drugs, alcohol, and depressants. And at the party, they threw me in a cold shower. I was blue. They threw me in a cold shower, and my heart started beating. They revived me.
Okay.
And then they called my parents. They put them on the phone, and they came and picked me up. My mother said she heard a voice that told her to do something. So my dad tried to move out of L.A. and move to Simi Valley to get me out of a wild bunch of friends I was
Right.
living with.
Mm-hmm.
Another time, to make a long story short.
Oh, don't do that. This is
Really?
talk radio.
Wow.
And I don't have any breaks today.
Okay, well, I was fairly healthy. Didn't have a doctor. Working on the docks of San Francisco Bay, and this was in the 70s. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I was pretty sure it was in the 70s, late 70s. And I was sick for a week or two. Wouldn't get better. Finally got frustrated. Drove my VW Bug down to Richmond Hospital, but then, I called up. They wouldn't take me. Only emergencies, and I didn't have a lot of experience with hospitals. I wasn't bleeding or anything, so I went back home and I called up my girlfriend. She came out. She looked at me and I was white. So she took me down to the emergency at Richmond Hospital. And they did a blood test, and they rushed me up to emergency because I had less than half of blood in me. And the policeman died from 50% blood loss from San Quentin. Was stabbed by a inmate or something like that. He died from blood loss shock when I was there. But they rushed me up and sent out for some blood. And I remember all night I kept drifting away, and then I would, to some thin thread. I was kind of I was just in darkness, and then just, and then I would come back. I wake up so cold, and my girlfriend, kept putting blankets on me. I had about 10 blankets on me. I was so cold. And the next morning, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 hours later, a doctor came in, looked at my chart. He started screaming, "Why hasn't this guy got any blood?" And they said, "Well, his blood hasn't come yet." And he said, "Well, put plasma, anything in him." And he was knocking over trays, screaming, yelling, and right then my blood came. So they put a unit of IV in each arm, and put I think it was 7 or 8 units of blood in me that night, right, right in a row. And then they kept me in there for a week, trying to figure out what happened. My stools were black, so I was digesting my blood. They did put cameras down in me and nuclear pictures all through my bloodstream and everything, but they said that all they could find was scar tissue in my duodenal, my lower stomach. But that scar tissue was a month old, and when I came in, my stools were black. I was losing blood at that time. But in the hospital, I did get a blessing from a missionary couple that was fellowshipping this lost hippie. And so finally they released me, and they said they had no explanation for it. I mean, what it sounds like is that my duodenal, I was bleeding from ulcers and digesting the blood. And it seems like that scar was an immediate healing of my stomach from that priesthood blessing.
Interesting. So was there a near-death experience related with that?
If there was, I never remembered any of it.
Okay.
I just kept drifting somewhere to nothingness, So that was the second time I kept...
tell us your near-death experiences, other than the traditional. I mean, not when you almost died.
This one I can't tell you about. This one's too personal. Maybe if we meet sometime, I will. But this
Fair
one,
enough.
I was.
Usually they are, but I understand.
This one I was alive. When I became religious. This one I was alive when I had experience where the veil opened up. And this was when I became religious and gave up on science and didn't believe that big book report I made in the 50s that I came from a monkey anymore.
So,
Yeah.
so is this a near-death experience?
No, I was totally alive. I was
Okay.
totally alive when the veil opened up.
When you say bell opened up, I'm not.
Veil, V-A-I-L.
Oh, veil. I'm sorry, Bell. Listen to me. So you had a veil experience. What
Yep.
we had a gentleman share what he called a near-death experience, and
Sometime I might write a book, but I don't know. I'll have to see. I'm pretty busy driving a truck lately.
right.
I'm pulling 3 trailers now. I decided to go for the more money.
Well, you earn it, I guess, with that kind of work.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I heard in other countries they pull 4 and 5 trailers.
Yeah,
They do follow me pretty good.
nobody can drive in the United States. So
I wouldn't think so. No.
they believe that,
No.
that the little four-wheelers believe that the highways were built for them.
You know, I would have to say though that, with people stuck in limbo, it doesn't surprise me because, very few people are progressing spiritually in this world right now. The people who attend church has gone way down. They're saying that Protestants, 80% of Protestant children who go to college don't go back to church. Some do later on, but I guess science and the monkey trial has really convinced people in France, Germany, Europe, all over the world that the Bible's a joke.
Well,
a lot of
I have to say that I think religion has been its own worst enemy in that regard, in that they demand that you take a literalist view of the Old Testament as, you know what I mean? And instead of just saying, it doesn't have to be a literal understanding, but for some reason, there has been this thread that it's got to be 6 days and it's got to be this, it's got to be that, and it precludes.
Well, see, that's the Baptists. That's the evangelicals. They know they don't. The Catholic Church claims authority. The apostles had authority. The Protestants know that they do not have authority. It was a Reformation, and so the only authority they can have is the perfect, infallible Word of God. I mean, they're backed into a corner. What can you do?
Well, and if you're making that, it doesn't stand up to close scrutiny.
Well, yeah, if you go back to the original word, that 6 days, if you go back to the Greek, it's a season. It's a time period. I don't know why the King James translators in there put 6 days. Maybe
Right.
they didn't have the 3 codices that have been discovered since 1611.
There is some challenges with the King James translation, certainly. But it was also, King James had a motive. He had an agenda. He wasn't.
Oh, sure.
He wasn't there just to, out of the goodness of his heart, provide a Bible.
Well, he didn't like the Bishop's Bible and Luther's German Bible. He didn't like kings being called tyrants.
Right.
He didn't like that at all. So, but it's too bad that he didn't decide to do it a few months earlier before he had Tyndale, killed. Because most of the King James Bible is Tyndale. I don't know what percentage, 80%, I don't know.
Yeah, that's a great story. The collection of the documents, the collection of the codices. That whole process is a great story. Because considering what they had to work with and the boundaries that they were given, because King James was a Catholic, wasn't he Catholic? Yeah.
No, King James started his own church. well, King Henry did. He
Right.
kept killing his wives.
Right. Well,
You
that's
know,
how you.
you
yeah.
know,
So King
and
James
with
was
the
a
king, but he was the head. King
Church
James
of England.
Was
Okay.
right.
So
Right.
he tended to lean a little bit Catholic, just from what I don't have to look at the history, but it's he, like I said, he had a powerful agenda for doing what he was doing. He wanted to standardize the Church of England, standardize Christianity in a way that benefited himself.
Well, sure. He came in there after Bloody Mary. Bloody Mary was just killing all the Protestants. She brought Catholicism back to England, but then Queen Elizabeth, she was, for her dad, being, King Henry, her dad,
Yep.
being head of the church, so. I mean, that was a bloody time, when fallen man was trying to grope for truth. But at least, when we came here to America, all the Protestants, stopped killing each other like they were doing over there in the Dark Ages, the Catholics and the Protestants all killing each other.
Well, and that was the result of this enlightenment, that reason has a very intrinsic value above and beyond what would be called the revealed Word of God. And so that, in a way, it was anti-religious, but it wasn't anti-religious as much as it was just pro-reason.
Political.
Yeah, pro-human. The human brain, the human mind can answer some of these unanswerable questions, or at least explore them. And
Sure.
the United
Sure.
States is a direct result of the Enlightenment. I mean, all of the founding
but
fathers were. That's
I
what
love
they cut their
talking
teeth
religion.
on, was Enlightenment thinkers.
Sure, I love talking religion. That's my favorite hobby for the last 40 years. But I did call in to say that I think these people, that are could be stuck in limbo, that they don't choose to progress. Just look at the people here on the earth. How many people are seeking spirituality? And how many people just, kick back and don't take it very seriously and just take it as a social organization, and aren't really deep into spirituality and spiritual experiences and changing their life and practicing heaven here on earth, and have the, growing closer into a relationship with Heavenly Father through Jesus Christ and the Holy Ghost.
Well, and that's yeah.
People here are in limbo. It's not surprised people here are not progressing and people over there are not progressing. They just go on in limbo.
Well, and we also have to take into consideration that what if this were hell? Bum, bum, bum.
Well, it's a type of hell. I mean,
what must I have been in a previous life? A Nazi death camp guard to end up how I've ended up?
It's not that bad. Why do you think you're so bad?
I don't know. Because it could be better. Nothing $1 million wouldn't fix. I'll start a GoFundMe.
Well, you need to listen to the guy that we were just talking about, the neurologist.
Yeah.
What was the book Proof of Heaven? He was saying that his traumatic experience of dying gave him spiritual experiences here on this earth. He says that our bad experiences, we can grow from them.
I think, well, that's an absolute truth, that we rarely grow in any direction when we're comfortable. That's just a truth. And only misery motivates us to make the change that growth requires. And that's,
Yeah.
I believe that.
And misery loves company.
Well,
Yes.
if you're not doing anything, if you're not, it's one thing to be miserable, but if you're not taking action to change the misery to do something different. then
Exactly.
yeah.
I experimented with a lot of different religions. I went from religion to religion, and the last 35 years, the doctors had told me 3 times I have 2 months to live.
Mhm.
Because of my leukemia. But my priesthood blessings. I'm still here 35 years later. There's no cure for leukemia.
Mhm.
But it seems that they might, next year have me go through chemotherapy a 3rd time. They already took my spleen out.
Yep.
I've got a scar from my ribs clear down under my belly button.
Now, do
and
we?
that,
Do you need a spleen? Is that like an appendix?
Well, the spleen, sort of. I mean, some say it filters the blood. Some say it helps our immune system. Our blood cells divide there, and also in our bone marrow. That people live without a spleen. I've lived 35 years without a spleen.
Yeah.
I just have to watch my white blood count and my immune system.
Yeah.
I can't. But some people fall and hit their stomach hard and their spleen ruptures and they lose their spleen. That happens quite often.
That's not uncommon in traffic accidents.
Yeah, but my spleen, it got so full of filtering out all the bad cancerous blood cells that it started pulling out the good blood cells. So they had to take it out so my blood count could go back up. It gave me another year.
Mm-hmm. So you talked about this idea of the spiritual growth, and that I'm guessing that you meant that ghosts, spirits who have, people who have been alive and now aren't, don't pass the veil as a term used because they haven't grown spiritually enough. Is that, because I've asked that question of several people, what is it about a ghost that here on earth that prevents them from crossing that particular boundary, the veil as it's called?
They're just stuck with human events, some tragedy or something, I believe. They're just not in progressing. I mean, yeah, they have unfinished business. They didn't get, was never resolved, and they're not interested into walking towards the light. In fact, some really fun movies. Do you remember Ghost?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was going to walk into the light, but he stayed here, for his girlfriend who he's going to marry, because there was the guy that murdered him. She was in danger, and she stayed here to help him. I mean, Whoopi Goldberg, she was funny in that movie.
Yeah, that was a very creative examination of the idea of ghosts.
Yeah, and do you remember the one also that where Richard Dreyfuss was a pilot and he would put out forest fires and he died?
Yeah, I remember this. I don't know if I saw the movie, but if I did, it's been so long.
Yeah, I mean, they had a lot of famous actresses in that. Her name, big in the 50s. Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Oh, Katharine Hepburn?
Yes. Oh, no, not Katharine Hepburn. It was the other one. The very sophisticated, beautiful woman. Can't think of her name right now, but she was in that movie with Richard Dreyfuss. It was Steven Spielberg movie. I can't even think the name of it.
Well, let's see.
Richard Dreyfuss, but he was putting out forest fires, and
I remember the movie. Yeah,
he hung around. He he wasn't ready to progress. He hung around his. He kind of hung around to help, another person become a pilot. I
Yeah,
remember in
that's. I seem to remember he was helping somebody else.
I mean, of course, we're talking about movies here, but there might be some truth sprinkled in those movies. I don't know why people hang back.
Boy, he's done a lot of movies.
Richard Dreyfuss, really?
Yep, I've got at least 60 of them.
Whoa! I kept thinking it's Backdraft, but no, it wasn't.
It was after
Backdraft.
Close Encounters, so it wasn't in the 70s. It was
Yeah.
in the. Let's see. Not Stand By Me.
Nope.
Always? Maybe?
Always, there you go. Always, that's it.
Yeah, there it
Yes,
is. The spirit of a
always.
recently deceased expert pilot mentors a newer pilot while watching him fall in love with the girlfriend that he left behind.
And who was the angel that mentored him to mentor the pilot?
Let's see if
It's on the tip of my
I'm
tongue.
looking at IMDb, and so they.
I think this was her last reappearance in films. I mean, she made so many films. She was such a high-paid actress.
Let's see.
I can't believe they don't have her name right up there in the title.
Well,
they
let's see. I was looking at the
Audrey
poster. Holly Hunter,
Audrey Hepburn.
John Goodman, and Richard
Audrey
Dreyfuss.
Hepburn.
Yeah. Okay. Universal.
Audrey Hepburn. It finally came to me.
I thought that's who I said. Who did I say?
No, no. You said. Now my mind just went blank
Yeah,
again.
but yeah.
You said.
Audrey Hepburn. Yeah, that's who I was thinking of,
Yeah.
but I said somebody else.
Oh, Audrey. Yeah,
Yeah, that was
said-
probably one of her last movies.
Catherine. You said Catherine. Catherine Hepburn.
Oh, okay, right.
Catherine Hepburn. Not no, it was Audrey Hepburn.
Yep. Yeah, she'd
Yeah.
been around.
Oh my God.
She another one that did. Yeah, Always. That was her last movie.
Yeah, that was quite a movie. But in both movies, they hung around, out of, to do acts of love to help other people progress.
Yep.
So a lot of people, they don't want to progress. They just want to stay in their little. Well, see, that's what damnation is. A river's going down a hill, and you build a dam, and it stops the water from progressing down out to the ocean. A dam stops progression. And
So
a lot of
how
people are
that
not
poses an interesting question to me. If I'm a spirit, if I'm a ghost, if I'm a breath, a pneuma,
in
and
a
I'm
body.
in this physical world and I'm opening and closing cupboards and walking around making people hear footsteps or whatever it is I'm doing, where is the progression? What is it?
Exactly. There isn't any there. Do you remember the other movie called The Sixth Sense? That little boy that could see spirits?
Yeah.
That's another interesting movie. He could see spirits all the time, and they don't even know they're dead. And they're going about their lives and stuff like that. And that famous actor that was a psychologist, he didn't even know he was dead.
Right,
He was
right.
helping
Bruce
the boy.
Willis.
Yes, Bruce Willis. There you go. And he wasn't until the end. It was a big shock when we all found out Bruce Willis, he's dead.
Yeah, the old M. Night Shyamalan, who disappointed us since then. I'm really disappointed in Mr. Shyamalan.
Yeah, I'll say.
But, yeah, Signs was a good movie. I liked that one. That was kind of creative.
I don't think I saw it. Which one was that?
It was called Signs. It
Oh,
was sort of
Signs.
an alien invasion movie, but it was more of an examination of human behavior.
Yeah, it was kind of like
In a
the War of the
stressful-
Worlds.
Yeah,
Yeah,
a
what
little
would
bit.
happen? What would happen to us Earthlings if we got invaded? You know, it wasn't like the day the Earth stood
Yeah,
still.
it was. They were because they were so isolated, but they had this. You know, it was an interesting. It was a very thoughtful movie, and that's like he did The Village, which was just completely freaked me out. I was like, oh, that's just creepy.
Yeah, that was dumb.
It was dumb when you figured it out. It was a great movie, and then once you're like, oh man, for heck's sake.
Well, now as far as sci-fi though, I mean, did
You still there?
yes? Hello,
All right.
1,
Yep,
2, 3,
I'm listening.
5. Did you see Arrival?
Yeah, I liked Arrival. I thought that was very creative. And of
Very
course, I have a
creative.
movie crush on Jennifer Chastain. You know, I have my heart for redheads and all that. You know, it's watching Sigourney Weaver crawl into the spacesuit at age 16 in Alien. You know, imprinted redheads on me for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I'll say. Yeah, there was people when I saw that. That's before they rated movies, and there was people that got up, and walked out of the movie when that thing busted out of his chest. The first Alien
Yep.
movie.
And the secret about that is they didn't tell the actors. They just said, "Hey, we're going to do a scene. Whatever happens, roll with it." And they didn't tell him that it was going to burst out. They said he was going to get sick. So they, up until that point, they didn't expect that. That was a complete surprise to all the actors. And
That was some of the best.
and if you watch that movie, you could absolutely tell that's what's going on because they all just freeze and look at it like, what just happened? And then they start
the whole
acting
audience
again.
jumped.
It was
The whole audience screamed.
Yep. Well, it was a great story because it was kind of like based on the idea of Who Goes There. That there was no way out, in Who Goes There, the thing. There's nowhere to escape. You can't wander out into the Arctic and escape the monster. So it's the same idea. You're in the spaceship. Where are you going to go?
Exactly. And
There's
it was
nowhere to
filmed-
hide. There's nowhere to get away from this creature, which is, scary just by itself. No matter what even if it was just an angry guy with an axe, it would still be scary. Because where do you
back
go?
In the early '60s, that the Alfred Hitchcock, Lucy Hardy had an axe, gave her husband 40 whacks. When she found what she had done, she gave the woman 41. What was that? She was out chopping up people.
Lizzie Borden, they just
wasn't-
did a remake of that they're coming out with.
Really?
It'll be kind of racy. I saw the preview.
What year was that? Was that 59 or 60? I
I
can't
don't
remember
know
what
when
year
the first
that
one came out. I know that they just come out, or they're getting ready to release one now with a couple of the
Lizzie Borden.
famous pretty girls of the Chloe Sevigny and I can't think of the name of the other one, have somewhat of a tawdry relationship against this very domineering father.
See, now my sci-fis aren't really the scary ones. Mine's a sci-fi. Like, have you seen Interstellar?
I was disappointed. It ended nicely, but it took me a while to kind of, I thought some of the exploration aspect of it. I mean, what was the book? Oh, where there's a bunch of alien spaceships, and you get on the spaceship and it just takes you somewhere and brings you back, but you might die because wherever it takes you. And so if you bring back technology or information, you become rich. And the guy gets on the ship with a bunch of people, and they end up right next to a black hole, and they're trying to rescue the other ship, and he ends up leaving everybody behind, but because he collected all the information, being so close to a black hole, that he becomes independently wealthy. but he has this guilt that he left him behind. And the reality is that because of time dilation, he's going to be dead and gone long before they even realize he's betrayed them. You know, they still won't even realize they've
several
been.
movies. I don't place that one.
Oh, I can't
I thought
remember
I
the name
knew
of that.
every sci-fi there is.
It's a book. I don't think it's been made into a movie. I'll have to look it up.
Oh, it's a book then. Okay.
Yeah, it's a sci-fi book. I
Yeah,
can't
it
remember
sounds
the name.
like it's several sci-fi movies that I've seen.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
common thread.
But I liked Interstellar, the five-dimensional beings that you never saw, the ones that opened up the wormhole.
Right. Yeah, you never
You know,
really
I-
know what that's all about.
And how they built that tesseract. But see, that tesseract opened up, gravity could move through time. So he sent a message back to his daughter.
Yep.
And he gave her the equation for gravity, which saved life on Earth. And then he ended up on a new planet in a new galaxy as a new Adam and Eve.
Right. He ends up coming back and then returning to find the girl he left behind.
Yes. And they had a bunch of frozen embryos ready to start a new Earth
Yeah, it was an
civilization.
interesting. And it's not a great Earth, but it's going to be okay.
Sure.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
There's some interesting thinking going on about life in general. And I did a couple of shows. I did at least one show on the idea of science fiction as a way of examining the world that you just can't do without it being science fiction. And I give the example of Star Trek when Captain Kirk had a romantic kiss with Uhura.
Yes.
And it was the first on-air TV kiss between a white person and a black person. And it was at the height of the civil rights movement.
Kinetic abilities.
Yeah, it was at the height of the civil rights movement, right there in 68, 69. I don't know, it was 67, 68. And everybody kind of just, because it was science fiction. Nobody believed it. It's not real. It's science fiction. And yet, if they had tried to do that on Dark Shadows or whatever else was on TV at the time, Gunsmoke, all hell would have broken loose.
Well, that's just like Gone with the Wind, when he said, frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. To say damn in a motion picture, major motion picture.
Yeah, that was a pretty
huge
powerful, for its time. We miss it now because we don't have the context, but yeah.
Sure. Did you ever see Space Odyssey 2010? The follow-up to Space Odyssey 2001.
I think I did. I watched Space Odyssey. I must have been 5 years old when I first saw that one, and so it really, I struggled with it because I didn't quite understand the depth of the story. Because I'm visual. At that age, you're visual. You don't. What you're.
It was long and drawn out, very slow and boring. They did a lot of special effects for the hippies.
Well, here's the interesting thing. That was 1968. Was it 68? 69?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Give or take a couple of weeks. And it, at the time, was the pinnacle of what you would call special effects. Space
Yes.
special effects. And
It wasn't fast moving.
And then we get Star Wars in 77.
Yes, and Indiana Jones, fast moving up in outer space. That was fast moving without those special effects.
Let's see. I was just pulling up 2001 to see 1968. And yeah, it was so at the top at that time, 1968. So 6 years later, 68, 8 years later, we get Star Wars, which was kind of considered the turning point for special effects. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And you look and
also
you watch
Terminator.
2001 now, and you're like, oh, what a clunky movie.
Well, exactly. And Terminator really broke some ground in special effects, too, when they had the liquid robot.
Yeah, that was, they weren't, to be able to do that, they would have had to use the computer graphic. And and you're like, oh, wow, that's totally cool. And it was a great
But the
story,
thing
too. I mean, it was
Sure.
a great, they didn't lose the story for the special effects. Sometimes you'll see that, great special effects, but where'd the actors go?
I'll be back. Oh, that was in the first one, though.
Yeah, that was the
I'll
first
be
one, and
back.
and Arnold Schwarzenegger, he just played those one-liners. Every movie he did, he had a stupid one-liner. Remember what I said? I'd kill you last, Sully. Yeah, that's what you said. I lied. As he drops him off the cliff. Commando was the movie that really started that,
Right.
where he just
thing I
he made a
liked about that-
caricature of himself.
And he did a good, even in Conan, he did good in
That
Conan.
was that
He
was the
picked
first time
right
he really.
movie.
That was his first real, I think, American. Everybody knew about Arnold being the weightlifter, world champion bodybuilder, but he actually pulled it off.
Yeah, I don't think he could have played a role where he was a suave, smooth talking,
he spoke.
man.
What was it, German or Austrian, whatever? Yeah, there's no smooth about that language.
No. But going back to Space Odyssey 2010, the reason I liked it is when the obelisk was around Jupiter, it divided up a lot of little ones, and then it collapsed it into a star, and then it gave us another planet to live on. And I like the idea of, if Mars was inhabitable to us and we could live on Mars, if we could terraform Mars or something.
Well, we're going to
where
have to do
intelligent-
something if we keep killing this planet. I mean, that's the reality there, that we're destroying this planet.
When I drive across America, I am so shocked how much desert, grasslands, and forest that is not being used across America. There is so much land. I'm not worried about it. Our oxygen doesn't come from trees; it comes from the ocean. The funny thing is that atheists, they say it only takes one over, quadrillion zeros. It only takes one time for life to have for unintelligent matter to organize itself, and then after organize itself to it then organize itself into life, and then give itself intelligence. They say for that to happen, it only would have had to take once in billions of.
I don't know if I buy that. I mean, you look at life on this planet, and it, as a process of energy, it's everywhere. So I can't imagine that as a process, that doesn't exist everywhere. I mean, and we find life in the most brutal environments on this planet. Life may not look like people, but I don't doubt that type of energy process exists in the universe as a matter of course.
Well, exactly, the Drake equation.
Well, yeah, some people don't like the Drake equation. It's hard to say if the data, I guess it's as good as we got. Hey, top of the hour, stand by. I need to give a station identification. Hey, this is AM 1640 K-Talk. If you want to join the conversation, give us a call, 801-254-1640. Okay, go ahead, Ray. I'm supposed to do that every hour.
Oh, sure. You know, the movie Contact. You know, I like how
That's
Jodie
a well
Foster
done.
played that.
They did that well.
Yeah.
They really captured the book, and I think they
Thought of
captured what
intelligent life out there.
Carl Sagan
You know, that story. Yeah,
wanted
there
to
you
say
go.
when
You know,
wrote
he
the
died
book.
before he finished that book.
Yeah.
And so the person who ended that book gave it a spark, you know, of, you know, yes, there could be higher, you know, evolved beings than us out there.
Well, and you know, and they really captured the idea of disbelief. You know, that our idea of absolute evidence. You know, well, you know, there's nothing on the tape, so there's no reason to believe. Yeah, but the tape is 16 hours long. You know,
Which they did tell the people. They
right?
kept that
Yeah.
quiet.
So you know, that was a very creative. That they really have to act on faith, not absolute knowledge.
Sure.
I thought it was well done. Of course, I also have a movie crush on what's her name, the star. Not
Jodie
much of a-
Foster?
not much of a crush if I can't remember her name. Yeah, she's
Jodie
always
Foster?
she's a great actress.
She is.
Jodie Foster, yeah.
Yes.
And it, you know,
Yeah.
it had a little bit. It had something for the religious folk, and it had something for the scientific folk, and it appealed to the idea of faith as a matter of finding knowledge. Which, you know, in science we tend to negate faith as a matter of science, and when in
But
reality,
it's interesting though. In the theory of evolution, you know, there are so many leaps of faith between all the jumping species, between all of the facts. They make all kinds of conjectures. You know, and they
there's
connect
a lot
the
of
dots.
stuff
They
in
connect
the
the dots. Evolution is a religion. They connect. There's a lot of leaps in faith where they're connecting the dots and they're taking educated guesses.
The only reason evolution is a controversy is because of what we talked about before, is the demand that the Bible be accepted as inerrant and absolute in its depictions. And that's the only reason evolution is problematic, because it doesn't in any way detract from a religious belief or deny God his grandeur or power. God can do it. Who are we to say how God does stuff? Maybe he did use the theory of evolution to accomplish his ends. It's you know what I mean? That just,
Sure.
to me, the physical evidence supports the theory of evolution. Now, maybe it doesn't answer all of the questions, but we rarely, in a scientific world, in the scientific model, you never do answer all the questions perfectly. Some scientists believe they do, but most of the time you end up creating far more questions than you have answers.
Well, exactly. You know, the tides issue with the moon. You know, it's impossible, and also the salt in the sea. If the Earth was this old, the salt would be so great in the sea. It's a proven, that there's so many things that they don't. I mean, evolution, I'm okay with it being taught in schools if they teach it as a theory, and they also teach the problems with it that they haven't overcome, that scientifically shows that evolution cannot work, the irreducible complexities. That RNA and DNA, the 19, not proteins, what am I, amino acids,
Right.
I mean, if you put all the information in our cells in books, those books would fill up the Grand Canyon just of one person. I mean, the intelligent design is far more reasonable than,
Well,
than evolution.
here's the part of that is that, quantum mechanics allows for that kind of, it does allow for perhaps not intelligent design in the exact way that is being propagated, but it certainly allows for a design of some kind.
Well, the problem is the 5 massive destructions, fossil record, the massive destructions of 95 or more percent of life on this earth, and then an explosion of life very fast afterward. For evolution to work, it has to take a lot of time, very slow.
Well, and there's been
no
some
evidence.
theory, they've got this epigenetics now that is really posing some interesting questions about just how evolution works, and it may demonstrate why we don't have what they call transitionary forms. Here's the thing: the difference between, the theory of evolution is based on the scientific method, which means you make an observation and you make a guess on what the observation is, on what the truth of that observation might be. Doesn't mean it's true. It just means that based on what I'm seeing, this is what should be the case. And then you test it. Now, in many cases, you find, well, that wasn't right, that wasn't right, that wasn't right. Oh, well, this works.
Exactly.
And so now that's science. And now if the data says, hey, we're testing this thing and we don't get any results that match what we should get, then this is going to go to bed. We can't use it anymore. And the prime example of that is cold fusion. They made the claim of cold fusion, but no other scientist on the planet could recreate the experiment. And so
Exactly. It has to be disprovable. Empirical evidence, yes, or measured, that which is measured. Exactly.
Right. So then the scientists said, okay, well, no cold fusion for you. The difference is within an intelligent design world, or in a creative and creation science, is that if there is no willingness to accept data that disagrees with their premise, they will not change their theory based on evidence. If the evidence says, hey, that evolution doesn't work this way, it works this other way, then science, it may take them a generation or two to get to that point just because of ego and fear, but science as a whole will make that transition. They'll say, and we've done that over and over again where we've said, hey, this doesn't work anymore.
Right. But the
And
problem
that's the
is,
nature of science. It may take a while, but science will do that. Creationism and creation science and intelligent design will not do that. They will never change their fundamental premise that God created the earth, irregardless of any other evidence.
well, there's a lot of ways to look at intelligent design. Number one, you don't have to say it was God. You could say it was a more advanced species. It's just like the Rh negative factor in our blood. There's no known evolutionary source for this.
Well,
So
the
some people
argument
say
is that it's alien. It's alien.
Exactly. So why does intelligent design have to be God? Why can't it be a possible alien source?
Could be just a random meteorite strike.
Well,
You know,
see,
I
that's
mean-
the thing. That's why the theory of evolution is not a theory. It's not even a hypothesis. It's a model. It's an idea, and
Well,
they call it
it's-
a theory, but it's not, because there's so many things that is not observable. You cannot observe a spark of life, the Big Bang, going to a goo, and a spark of life, ending up becoming me and you. It is
Well-
not empirical. It's not observable.
So I can
so you have a bunch of-
argue that I can demonstrate that genetic shift occurs, that DNA gene frequency occurs over time, And I
No,
can
within
that's a
species.
fact. I can show it. I
No.
can prove it over and
No,
over
within
again.
species, but the fruit fly experiment has been a failure all three times. They were going to do these thousands of generations, and they mutated them, and everyone's been a failure. They have not demonstrated a mutation that is better, that it benefits from the previous to another species.
Well,
The
one
fruit fly experiment has been a total failure. Science.
one challenge
Science actually disproves evolution.
is
The fruit
that
fly
we don't
experiment
really, we don't fully, and this is that we don't fully appreciate what an evolutionary pressure is. Is it the amount of food?
See, that's why it's a model. That's why it's a
Right.
model. We don't know.
But I can
This is-
demonstrate that gene frequency changes over time, and that
color
phenotype,
like dogs.
like
You have
white moss turn black if the environment goes from white to black, like it did in the early industrial revolution, and the birds eat the white moss because they can't hide anymore. You don't get white moss anymore. You get black moths. I mean, that occurs. Now, if that occurs, that's a truth. So that's a piece of information. And I know that I have various types of creatures because I can see them. So I know that gene frequency changes over time, and it changes
roughly
phenotype.
6,000 years. Yeah, roughly. Within dogs, you can see big dogs, short dogs, long hair, short hair, long ear. There's all these changes within species that there is no fossil record of say a mouse growing wings, developing sonar, and turning into a bat. It's just not there in the fossil record.
Well, I mean, you could look at the taphonomy of life, and what most in evolution doesn't say that. They say that there may be common ancestry, that simple to complex or is probably the fundamental argument you're making, is that it didn't happen from
Exactly.
simple
Leaps
to
of faith.
complex.
It's a religion. It's leaps of faith.
Well, and
You
that's
know,
the other side, is that, there are scientists who treat that theory as religion, and they will not change their
Connecting the
premise
dots.
based
There's
on
no
any other
evidence.
evidence. That's also
Exactly.
true. That's why it takes a couple generations to change theory in science, usually.
And it has to be observed or measured or testable in a lab.
Right.
If it's not, it is not science. It has to be disprovable. And see, the thing is, if you walk along the beach, I've invented this. If you walk along the beach and you come to a pile of sand and you say, wow, how'd this get here? So you start investigating, you dig into it, you find a rock, and you go, oh, okay, the wind blew the sand up on this rock, piled it up, and look, nature did it. Okay. Come a little further, you find a sandcastle. And you say, well, now, how did nature build this sandcastle? And you say, was there intelligent design in this sandcastle, or did nature build this sandcastle? Well, yeah, 1 over a zillion zeros, maybe nature could have done this. But, there's things that are self-evident. Just like when you find an arrowhead, you say, now, maybe one of these could have rolled down a mountain, chipped and become an arrowhead. But when you find many, many chipped arrowheads, it's self-evident that there was intelligent design in the making of that arrowhead.
But we also have a clear understanding of I can create an arrowhead. I understand the process. I can create an arrowhead that looks exactly like the arrowhead that you found. And I can tell you, here's the process. Now, if I can do this, then the evidence, even though I've never seen it happen, I could say another human did this.
Exactly. And we can make computers. We can make computers and program them, and then they go through a pre-programmed thought process. But the thing is, we're only on the age of computers. We cannot create life, DNA, RNA. We can't
Right,
do it. So
you
it's
know,
so far
we-
it's so far advanced beyond us that we're just speculating. You know, I mean, some things are self-evident. If you come and find a pictograph on a cave and you say, "Oh, look, this was done by intelligent design," well, see, and we can make a pictograph, but we cannot make DNA and RNA and all these enzymes and everything. That there are so many biologists that are now signing a paper saying that evolution's impossible. The true biologists that are deep into it, you know, they're signing a paper saying, no, there is intelligence we are living computers. That the design is beyond, you know, any evidence we have of that evolution happening, you know, from goo to me and you by way of the zoo. You know, there's just no evidence of it. It's a idea.
Well,
and
here's the thing: is it doesn't have. You know, you can't necessarily, and it's the simplest explanation is most likely to be the most accurate. And so, even though perhaps maybe my application of that simplest explanation isn't the total truth, that's
Sure,
a valid
Occam's
method
razor.
of science.
Occam's razor, yes.
I mean, that's a valid technique of discovering further truth. Is the
Sure,
simplest.
and Sherlock Holmes, you know, deductive, you know, elimination reasoning. Exactly. But see, that's the thing to me. Intelligent design is more reasonable by the information that's out there than evolution. And I think both should be taught in school. Intelligent design should be taught by biologists, not religious
Well, as
people,
long as
biologists.
and that go back to my original argument, as long as a proponent of intelligent design will change their theory if evidence applies. Evolution as a process gets argued about all the time. No one evolutionary biologist agrees necessarily with the other one on the processes. And they bang it out in those peer-reviewed journals, and some of those ideas get carried further and are accepted, and others are put to the wayside. If
Well, see, that's the
creation
problem.
science or create intelligent design is willing to have that process applied to it, and I don't believe that it is, based on the philosophy of the individuals that are proposing it, then they can join science at the table. But until they're willing to do that, they can't.
Well, exactly. See, that's the problem that the Southern Baptist intelligence design people, they want God taught in the schools, but the problem, the problem is if they would just say, okay, we will let intelligent design be taught in the schools, but it will be taught by biologists. Then you have the eyeball and the nervous system, the cell membrane, all these irreducible complexities that just appear. And they're irreducible complexities, but the trouble is all the money for the last 100 since Darwin has gone to being put into intelligent design by all the people writing the books, teaching the college classes. All the colleges have taken over by atheists. It used to be religion that ran all the schools in the 17 and 1800s. But now atheists run the schools, and they put all the money, they give all the grants to people who are promoting intelligent design and putting down the Bible. But they won't put any. But see, there's the rate program.
Having
there's also the universal model.
Anthropologist, which is it's anthropology, which is the track that argues evolution, is the least funded of most scholarly pursuits at the university level. So that
other is funded more?
Engineering.
Oh, anthropology. I got you now. Sure.
Really, the portion of the university environment that's arguing evolution doesn't get funded like any other portion. They're the least funded, so that probably doesn't hold water. Though every individual in school, every
it's funded more
anthropologist,
than
every
intelligent
doctor
design.
goes through an anthropology class of some kind.
Sure.
And they get exposed to the theory, which says, hey, we know enough to make this proposal about how things happen. But like I said, this new idea of epigenetics is turning evolution on its head. And now they've made some discoveries about human fossils that exist earlier than they ever expected possible, that's turning the taphonomy of human evolution, if you will, on its head. And science is having to deal with that. They're changing. They're willing to say, okay, we've got new evidence. We have to make a new model that fits the evidence. And it may take a generation for that to happen, but it will happen.
Say that. They always say that, but I mean, what about now having dinosaur flesh?
Well, they just found a fossil that had they were able to look at the texture of dinosaur flesh.
Right.
Still a
60
fossil.
billion years ago. Well, no, there's flesh. Even flesh of what's the elephant?
The woolly mammoth.
Woolly mammoth, sure.
Yeah, you're only dealing with 10,000 years ago, woolly mammoth.
Exactly. But they do have dinosaur flesh now, and they are looking at, and they are making rocks under pressure now, and they do in granite. They have helium impressions, and when you have these helium impressions in granite, that means it had to be made instantly. Helium has a half-life. And to have a helium disintegrating and be impressed upon granite was, they say, billions and billions of years.
So, and I know who you're talking about. Here's my proposal: is that they need to present their research to peer-reviewed journals and have other scientists recreate those experiments in their own labs using
They are.
Well,
the universal model is going around the schools creating rock right in front of people under pressure.
Peer review and anecdotal evidence, it's two different animals. If I'm a geologist and I read a universal model paper, okay, you can build a granite rock in a autoclave, then I should be able to do that. And I follow the instructions and I do that. And I said, okay, your theory has merit. However, here's some questions. Here's some of this. It gets tested. And I don't know if the universal model currently is willing to stand to that level of test, because they have not presented their data to anything peer-reviewed. In fact, they call it...
Well, they're coming out with their third book.
Well, I understand that. That's a book. It's not a peer-reviewed paper that describes their experiment.
Well, any peer can take the book and look at it. Their book is full of thousands of scientific discoveries that cannot be explained other than the flood.
I understand what you're saying. I mean, it's great, but in the scientific community, you have to submit, publish or perish. You have to write your paper and get it accepted by a proponent, some journal that says, hey, we like this. And part of that is you have to create. If I'm arguing you can build rocks in an autoclave, you describe how that happens. I mean, you read a scientific paper, and a third of it is describing the building of the experiment, and then the rest is talking about the results, so that any scientist can go, okay, I'm going to recreate this experiment in my lab, and if I get the same results, then that I can write a paper saying, hey, what they did is true, we have to reevaluate. And then over time, you get enough people convinced of that. But you're not going to convince a scientist to just read a book without experiment that they can recreate in their labs to test the argument, to test the premise.
The book shows how to do the experiment, and he's going around schools in front of people doing the experiment, and anybody can do it. Look what happened to Velikovsky. When he went before peer review, Carl Sagan, disgraced him. But all of the 18 predictions that Velikovsky made came true when we went out into our solar system. And those 16 to 18 predictions that Carl Sagan made was proved him false. And even Einstein was starting to take a look at Velikovsky and saying maybe there is something to catastrophism. Now they have accepted the one hit that killed the dinosaurs.
Now, Baron, see what happened? It took a while. It took a while, but it happened. And that's science.
It hasn't happened, though. For that one, it happened.
There is a history of science. You get a generation of scientists, they're right, everybody else is wrong. And so they don't want to throw away their theory, particularly when somebody comes up and says, hey, everything you've set your life on, your life's work, it has no meaning.
Thank you. That's what I've been working
and that's the truth. There's nothing, and that's a reality of a human thing. But science, over time, gets past that, but through the peer review, through the idea of publishing your stuff and having other people look at it. Because even though Velikovsky got beat up by Carl Sagan, 20 years from now, some grad student's going to say, oh, wow, look, I redid his experiment and it worked. And somebody else is going to go, oh, let's try it again. Or and over time, and it does take time,
Hundreds
that will
of
happen.
Years.
That process never happens or has not happened in the creation universal model world.
And see, that's the trouble that I guess after
and
the
they
monkey
can't
trial,
claim science unless they're willing to walk on the hot coals.
And see, that's the trouble after the Scopes trial. Religion was taught in the schools that, religion was thrown out of the schools, and now they teach evolution, and all the money's gone into evolution, but that's the problem. Ever since Darwin, in the 1850s, that's got more steam, and that's all that's taught in our schools. And the kids are coming out of our schools, especially colleges, they're coming out socialists, communists, and atheists. And these kids believe that evolution is a fact. Well, it's not. And look at our society. They took, in 1961 and 63, they took 10 Commandments out of the schools and the Bible. And before that, in the 50s, the biggest problem in schools was chewing bubblegum, running in corridors, holding hands in the corridors. You'd go to detention. Now, there's shootings and rapes and gangs and drugs in our society.
Well, here would be my argument that had nothing to do with whether or not God was taken out of schools, as that the two-parent family went away.
Yes,
for whatever reason. You
happened.
can argue why that happened, but that's
both of them had, yes. Both
whether
of them had
regardless of why it happened.
You can look at the problems before 1961 and 63, and then afterwards, and the huge difference of the problems in the schools. I mean, kids used to go to school with guns in their gun racks, and trucks unlocked. And after school, they'd go out and they'd shoot some squirrels or something. No, nobody was shooting school. I mean, they used to have gun clubs. And after school, you'd go out target practice right there on the school grounds. I mean, people can't see that they took down from the schools, thou shalt not kill. Oh,
well, and
thou shalt not lie. Thou shalt not lie. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not commit adultery.
Well, and I would argue that those arguments, because it's always been illegal to kill, I mean, that's never not been the case.
Well,
So
even in civilized societies, people get away with it, you know. But see, the thing is, when people are taught that there is a judgment day and we will be accountable for our actions, and we will be accountable either to society for killing, and ultimately, that we're going to have to live with ourselves. And what destroyed Rome? What destroyed societies? What built societies? Religion is a powerful source of civilization. Generally, the good religions, the bad ones, destroy too.
well,
but when
I-
you take religion out of your culture, when people don't believe we're not accountable, that anything goes. That just like in the 60s, anything goes. I mean, I have a book report that I did in the 60s, and there's no words. It's a cartoon drawing, crayon. And there's an amoeba, and then there's a jellyfish, and then there's a fish, an alligator walking out, and a monkey and a man. I still have it. I can show it to you. And all my life, I love science. But I decided to apply science to religion. And I started testing the religious thing. I started developing faith. I started living the teachings. And I was rewarded with spiritual experiences. I applied the scientific method to, is there another dimension out there where spirits live, where God lives? And it was opened up to me. If I'm going to have a relationship with God, I have to develop a personal relationship with God. And I have to do it the way I'm told in the Bible.
I don't think that any individual is precluded from doing that, nor have parents been precluded from teaching their children to do that, irregardless of whether or not prayer has been taken out of school or not, or the Ten Commandments taking off, because the government should not be trying to propagate a religious viewpoint, and that's essentially what, because individuals can still believe and practice whatever they want. And the things you talked about, no stealing, no killing, all of those are still cultural values that matter. And
they do. They're open borders. They're the MS-13. They're coming in. They're killing our people. In Mexico, it's legal to have sex at 12 years old, and they're coming in with these values and changing our culture. And the thing that I was going to say, and now I forgot the thought. As far as this country was founded on religious freedom, the Pilgrims came over here as religious people. Came over here and built this country, this experiment, this self-rule, self-government. And it has to be, if people become evil, then self-government will not work. We'll destroy each other. We'll kill each other. We'll steal from each other. We have to have a high moral, a high value people to have a self-governing government. And this experiment came over here. The founding fathers put it together based on religion.
Well, yeah,
and
we have
Thomas
to be
Jefferson
careful
said,
comparing the Pilgrims with the founding fathers, because they're two different animals. The Pilgrims would not have been very fond of the founding fathers, because the founding fathers would have been considered apostates to the Pilgrims.
And compared to us, too. So you have to give a little latitude when you're comparing things. But when they were coming over here, and the 13 colonies were practicing different religions, and some of the religions was taxing, paying the church, and supporting this church. But the separation of church and state is we just don't want the government supporting churches or abortion with our taxes. We choose what religion we're going to support. not the government. That's all separation of church. But now the government has kicked us out of the schools. You know, you can have a gay pride day, but you can't have Jesus Christ Day or Christian Day. We're almost being put, we're taking, you know, unalienable means unchangeable. You cannot take them away. Our unalienable rights of free speech. That we cannot speak religion anymore in the schools, in the public forum. We're almost back in the catacombs.
I don't believe in this apocalypse that you're, you know, it's just not.
Do you know that Obama was making it illegal to have the Bible in the military? Hillary was getting ready to go after the churches and tax them, start taxing them.
Well, here's an argument. One of the ideas of that we don't tax churches is that they don't participate in the political forum. They don't sponsor candidates. They don't agree, you know, they're separate. And yet, that's not the case. So maybe if they want to not play nice, they don't want to be churches, they want to be political advocates, then they pay taxes just like every other political advocate does.
Well, see,
how
that's
is that
socialism.
not fair?
This is how it's not fair.
And just because you call yourself a religion doesn't give you a hall pass.
This is how it's not fair. After Kennedy, we had the Texan. What was his name?
Johnson.
And he didn't like that some of his enemies had charities. And so because they had charities, they used that money politically to go after him. So he had an executive order and did a thing where charities cannot get involved political. Well, the IRS and the liberals extended that and said, well, now we can't have religions getting political. But now, wait a minute. Religious people can vote. We can be political.
Right.
In the
as
founding,
people.
the founding of the
But
founding,
not as an organization.
The founding of this country, they did talk politics in churches. They did that for 100 years or more, you know, until the IRS was invented in 1913. And between the Internal Revenue Service and Johnson's rule, religions got scared that they were going to lose their tax status if they got involved in politics. Well, religion, this country was based on religion.
The reality, here's some truth, that within the South, the black churches argued for civil rights over the pulpit. Martin Luther King was the Reverend Martin Luther King. He started as a preacher preaching civil rights.
Exactly. And at the time of Johnson, they let them do it. And they still let them do it.
Right, because they're not supporting a specific candidate.
No, they do.
You know, you can make a moral argument over the pulpit. You cannot say you must vote as members for this guy.
But now wait a minute, Tom Cavanaugh. You know, if he did grope this girl, is that a moral issue? Can religions talk for Kavanaugh or against Kavanaugh?
As a Christian, one would say yes, that was absolutely a moral.
But the religions are afraid to do it over their pulpits because they're afraid of Hillary going after the churches and taking away their tax.
Well, here's how you say it. We don't believe that grabbing a female and stopping her from screaming while you touch her private parts is an appropriate moral action, and we don't want you supporting anyone who does that. Period. You know, because it really is a moral argument. It's not a political argument. I mean, this is the frustration I have, is the Republican Party has no desire to accept moral values when it interferes with their political agenda. You know, if you're the party of morality, then it matters, and it doesn't matter about your political agenda.
Well, Clinton was playing around in the White House.
It's either side. I'm not picking sides. I'm just saying none of them have moral compasses that are worth a dang.
That this guy did an unproved accusation 40 years ago.
So
Where-
if somebody were to say a Catholic priest touched myself 40 years ago, is that why are those accusations getting more weight than this female?
Well, there should
Because
be a
she's
statute
female?
of limitations. There should be a statute of limitations.
Well,
The founding fathers gave us a statute of limitation that has been destroyed because we know the evil designs of man. You know, where you know, you have evil Republicans and evil Democrats. They want to win at no matter what the cost.
right.
You know, no matter what the cost, that they only want to push their side. But when you have a government that's ruling of the people, by the people, and for the people, we should have nullification. We should have more power than the judges.
Well,
the
we
founding
do. You
fathers
just,
gave
I mean,
it.
look at the the Bundy trial. They shut the government
finally
down. The jury found those guys not guilty. Shut them down. Shut the government down. So that the idea that we don't have that is not true, because we just watched it happen.
You go to when you get called on the jury the next time. Tell everybody you know when they're being interviewed to tell the people interviewing them that they believe in nullification and watch them being disqualified from jury duty.
Well,
You watch them.
Be in law enforcement, be in the military, there are lots of
Yes.
things that lawyers and the part of that is they're only allowed to pull a certain percentage. They're not allowed to remove everybody. Each side gets, say you have a jury of 13, each side can argue about 6 that they can pull from the jury. But so they have some sway, but not entirely. So even if they made that argument about nullification, they wouldn't be able to disqualify all of the people on the jury. I mean, it gives them some say on who's on the jury, but not as much as everybody believes.
There was a judge that said, take this jury and take them over to the other courtroom and bring their jury and bring them over to this courtroom. Do you know how much freedom we have lost in this country? There was an old woman and man that came back from a mission. And when they came across the border, someone had put some marijuana in their trailer. So they were convicted. And the judge was so hard on them, and sent them to prison. Now, obviously, by the law, they were guilty, but they should have been nullified and set free. There's so many people in prison right now that should not be there, just because when you're going strictly by the law, yes, but a lot of times the law is not just in all situations. And we as citizens, as jurors, should be able to say, this is a good law.
Well, they
but
very
in this
easily,
case-
the jury could have said not guilty. Once the
But
jury
they don't
says
know
that, the
that.
judge is done.
But see, the last 150 years, they've been teaching socialism in our schools. They have not been teaching how the founding fathers set up this country to work. And people don't know. I have gone out the last 40 years and educated myself that people don't know how this country worked and should have worked. We have gone away from the founding fathers. The government used to be power to the people from the bottom up, not from the top down.
Well, the founding fathers owned slaves. So
Yes.
why would that be a valid thing today?
Slavery is not a valid thing.
Exactly.
The Northerners didn't want it. So I'm saying that they were perfect gods back then?
Well, that's what a lot of, when people say the founding fathers, that's
gave us
usually
a
the
system.
where they're coming from.
They gave us a system that there has never been a like in the history of
I
civilization.
agree with you.
And this has been an experiment, and we have gone away from our freedoms. This experiment is being destroyed. And this country would be great again if we went back to the system the founding fathers gave us. They studied all nations. They were not stupid cave people.
No.
They studied all civilized governments, and they gave us the best of all of them and put them together.
Well, and I made the argument that they were children of the Enlightenment, that the, Hobbes, Rousseau, and others were where the founding fathers cut their teeth with the three fundamentals of the Enlightenment, that the
I
individual
like that now.
has more value than the whole. That
Yes.
the
It's like that good book, La Miserable.
reason is more valid than any other way of that the reason is the most valid way to discover truth, and that the right of individuals to own property is a God-given inalienable right.
Exactly.
And so when you look at the
Exactly.
Constitution, it enshrines those three values pretty consistently
Supreme-
against the government, against the whole, against the majority, against...
No, the Supreme Court does not hold that up at all. Our property tax. Try not paying property tax and see if they don't come and take away your property.
Well, and there is some but who we elect the individuals that create the laws that allow that to happen. I mean, if anything, it's our fault. It's not
Yes, it's our fault, and it's our schools' fault. Our schools are not teaching.
Well, the students don't vote. Students don't vote till they're 18. It is our
Exactly,
fault.
but they're being taught socialism. I was taught socialism and communism, and then after I got to school, I taught myself the founding fathers, and now I've learned why we're in the mess that we're in today. People's lives are so busy, they don't have time to go out and re-educate themselves and find out why the system used to work and why it's not working now.
We're a long way from ghosts.
Yes, I have to fight my way through these topics, but every so often I calm down because you make a point, and then I shout hooray. I don't have to fight my way through the common education of the last 150 years.
I struggle with the idea that individuals with agendas of power, let me step back. I believe in liberty, and what that means to me is that other people are going to do things that I absolutely abhor and disagree with. That includes abortion. That includes not praying in school. That includes drinking, smoking dope, whatever. Liberty means that other people get to do things you don't like. And so I get really frustrated when I hear either party speak of liberty and then demand that I live a certain particular way, whether it's Republican or Democrat, because liberty says, leave me alone, I'm not hurting anybody.
Exactly, a democratic republic. Democracy says there's 10 wolves and 2 sheep. Let's vote and see what we're going to have for dinner.
What's for dinner.
Exactly. That's why democracy is very bad for liberty.
And we're not we're a republic. We're a democratic republic. And
exactly.
that works. I think that there has to, and the founding fathers understood that the majority could be jerks, and that so we have the Senate, and we have the then Senate was kind of a counterbalance to the mob of the House of Representatives.
Right, but we don't have separation of powers anymore because senators are elected.
Well,
in 1913.
that there's some argument about that. I don't know if it's necessarily a bad thing, but
Well,
most
sure
of the
it's bad.
individuals who are senators,
whoever can fire them is who they're accountable to. And if the states can fire them and keep the federal government out of the states, then the senators are there to keep the federal government out of the states, and we have the United States of America. The states created the federal government. But if the federal government becomes more powerful than the states, then now we have the federal government of the United States. And now the federal government has become more powerful than the states. And so now the senators are elected to the people, so they answer to the people and not to the states. The states used to have supreme power to the federal government, and we don't anymore. And that's why the churches used to handle welfare, but now the federal government handles welfare. And when you handle
Not
welfare,
very well. You know, we act like that's a big deal, and the government barely does that. You know, if welfare,
and we have homeless.
most
We have
people are going to
homeless
starve to
everywhere.
death on welfare.
Food
Or-
stamps, exactly. They've done a horrible job, and they need to give it back to the states and back to the religion and back to the churches and the charitable foundation like the Red Cross. Government, nowhere does it say, the Founding Fathers said, to promote the general welfare. Welfare means happiness of the people.
Well, general means
Now-
that
now-
they
now
have
the-
a way of living.
No. There is no guarantee in life that people have a way of living.
Promote the general
There-
welfare. We have snowplows. We have an Air Force.
Free enterprise gives
You
us
know,
snowplows.
No, it doesn't.
Free enter
Here's the, you know,
Free en-
this is the challenge I have with
Invention.
this idea of
Invention.
unbridled capitalism, that somehow free enterprise is going to
Now,
solve
I
our
didn't say
problems. It
unbridled.
doesn't.
I didn't say unbridled where you can be criminals
You
and
know,
do
I mean,
criminal
just look
acts
at
against
Standard
people.
Oil. If you want to see what capitalism without any accountability can do, that's what it does. It's not entirely a good thing. Capitalism without
he was
accountability
criminal.
is bad.
He was criminal the way he put other people out of business, just like what China's doing to us now.
Nobody held him accountable for that. Who?
The
What?
people-
How do you? How?
the people
Why wasn't
should've.
Standard Oil and Mr. Rockefeller held accountable for his criminal activity? Because
All the money he was
they
paid,
were making money.
all the politicians. Exactly. And the politicians get corrupt. That's why we got to have the vetting system back. Utah is the last state in America that has the vetting system. Right now, even Mitt Romney hardly went through the vetting system. He paid for people to go out to sign votes and get them in there. That was not what the Founding Fathers give us. If you have every neighborhood vetting their neighbors, who they're going to vote for, then you don't have career politicians. You don't have Mitt Romney. You don't have Hatch.
Well, you know, the reality is, if
vetting
I go into the
system-
voting booth, it's my vote. It's mine. It doesn't matter how much money you spent. It doesn't matter how
in a
much how fancy you
democracy, in
look.
a
It's mine.
democracy, in a democracy, yes, but that did not work in Greece. You got to have a democratic republic
Well,
working the way the
when
Founding
I
Fathers
elect
gave us
Mitt
for
Romney
it to
or
work.
not, that's my fault. If you know, that's our fault. If we get a Mitt Romney, that's the people of Utah's fault for doing that. Period.
If we
They have
vetted
that responsibility. You're not going to change that if the people will not take
Yes.
that responsibility. When 20%
Yes.
of the eligible voters actually vote, that's why you get Mitt Romney's and his
right
vote.
now we are vetting people through the media. Paid advertisements, big dollar
Right.
advertisements to get people to get their vote. That's not what the Founding Fathers gave us. The Founding Fathers gave us a vetting system.
Well, the media
Where we
has
get
been
together with the
doing that
caucuses. We
since
get
the
together with the
beginning.
caucuses. See, I have to fight to make my point. I'm so tired. There's so many points I have to make.
I'm
And
not.
I struggle-
We disagree on methodology. You know, and that's
Well,
okay.
I would like to sit down and have you very calmly make your points, and then you give me the time to make my points, and then with reason have people decide who has made the better point.
right.
You know, let's look at reason and hear arguments. You know, I mean, right now it's too stressful for me to drive, worry about traffic, and struggle my way through the misinformation that has been taught to our civilization for the last 150 years, and work my way through the way people think. They think like they know the system the Founding Fathers gave us. And they think they're more educated and sophisticated than the Founding Fathers. And they have no idea why we're in the mess that we're in. And it's too hard to sit here and struggle through a conversation when I can't calmly, with reason, make points through factual points and have a reasonable conversation with you.
I thought we were being pretty reasonable.
Well, we are being pretty reasonable, but I think we could be a lot more reasonable, if we had more time to talk about each of these issues, and if we sat down and give our full attention to it.
It'd be more reasonable if you would just agree with me.
I do enjoy talking with you. I mean, we have really gone all over the place, and I wish I could kick back, put my feet up on a fire, and relax and have a conversation with you. A lot of conversations with you. It's hard to talk when I have to drive and I have to, pull 3 trailers and keep my mind on.
Well, and
what I'm
I don't
doing.
want you to. Yeah, well, and that's part of. We got distracted from ghosts, but that's okay. It is talk radio, and if anybody didn't like that, they could have called in and told us to stop.
Sure.
Sure. But it is the time for the end of the show. At least according to my computer. I don't have any breaks. For some reason, they turned off my programming for my show. We're getting ready to move the station, so I think things are getting unplugged and moved and that sort of thing. So that's a challenge. I'm working on a future guest on near-death experience.
And I hope you get this guy on that I mentioned, this neurologist, and he wrote the book Proof of Heaven.
Yeah, I'll look at that. I've
science.
heard of it, but I don't know, and sometimes when they're famous like that, they don't want to talk to little old me. They unless they put out a new book, they don't want to talk to anybody. It is a challenge to get guests. They don't always.
Sure.
It is.
Well, I have to admit, with the name of your show and selling snake oil, they would back off a little bit. But
I've had a couple people think
you,
that, but I've never. Most of them, once they, and I send them to my page and say, listen to my stuff, and see if it's what you like. And some don't care.
Because you are easy to talk with, and you are knowledgeable, and you are credible, and you do reason and listen to reason.
Well, I appreciate that.
So if this guy could sell a lot of books here in Utah, if he would now that if he could find out now that K Talk Radio is almost at 10,000 watts, it's not.
Yeah,
just
we got a little bit
insanity.
oomphy. Yeah, they turn us down in the evening, but during the day we're pretty strong. At least that's my understanding. I don't know that's electrical, mechanical engineering stuff. I don't have a clue.
And the internet worldwide.
Right. Yeah, and that's the neat part is, they can listen online, or they can listen, they can download my stuff, and I have the Facebook page, Dr. Grimmy's Old Time Medicine Show, that if you have a topic or a guest, you can always refer. You can always send me a note. And we'll see. I don't, if you want to argue with me, if I'm wrong, which I usually am in many ways, because I make this stuff up as I go.
We're all struggling to understand things with a broader point of view, with more facts.
Well, we're at the end of the show, top of the hour. Got to go. Stay out of trouble, Ray. Drive safe.
Thank you, my friend.
All right.
You have a good one.
So this is the Dr. Grimmy Show, Old Time Medicine Show, Conversation Extravaganza at the end of another 4-hour block. We got away from ghosts, but that's okay. Nobody called and complained. We'll see you next week, 8 p.m. on Saturday. Not sure of the topic, but we'll find out. I'll surprise you. AM 1640. We'll talk to you on the flip side.
Wearing a wire to tape the president, and that kind of thing would have required follow-up, and I would have known about it. That didn't happen. But there are other sources who are adamant that this was quite serious and that this was not a laughing matter.
A spokesman for an Arab separatist group in Iran says members of his organization carried out an attack on an Iranian military parade. Details from correspondent Ben Wiedemann.
It's the worst such attack in Iran in years. At least 25 people dead, 60 wounded, civilians as well as soldiers, at a military parade in the city of Ahvaz near the Iraqi border.
Before heading to New York for the upcoming UN General Assembly meeting, Iranian President Hassan Rouhani accused the U.S. of wanting to create insecurity in the Islamic Republic. He also accused U.S.-backed Gulf Arab states of providing financial and military support for anti-government ethnic Arab groups. The United Nations convenes its annual meeting of world leaders on Monday, addressing threats ranging from Mideast conflicts to the effects of global warming. Conflicts in Syria and Yemen will be in the spotlight, along with the Middle East, as well as African hotspots and Iran. I'm Barbara Cusack.
Hi, I'm Scott Tannen, founder of Boll & Branch. We make the softest, most comfortable organic cotton sheets you'll ever sleep on. Because we only sell them online at bollandbranch.com, our sheets cost less than half of designer brands and are twice the quality. Hundreds of thousands of Americans love Boll & Branch sheets, including 3 U.S. presidents. Right now, get $50 off your first set of sheets plus free shipping at bollandbranch.com. Promo code DOZE, spelled B-O-L-L, and branch.com. Promo code DOZE.
If you are behind on your bills, then this message is for you. How would you like to have a large portion of your credit card debt or medical bills forgiven? National Credit Card Relief would like to give you free information on a proven debt forgiveness program. It's not bankruptcy, it's not consolidation. This special program actually wipes clean the portion of your debt that is forgiven. Call for your free forgiveness information now. 800-291-6670. That's 800-291-6670. Don't wait. Call 800-291-6670. Not available in North Dakota.
The FAA would require to set new minimum requirements for seats on airplanes under legislation being considered in the House this week.
The legislation could possibly give passengers relief from ever-shrinking legroom and those cramped seats on airlines. The regulation of seat width and legroom is part of a 5-year extension of federal aviation programs announced early Saturday by Republican and Democratic leaders of the House and Senate committees that oversee the nation's air travel. Congress faces a September 30th deadline to keep FAA programs running. The Senate will also need to take up the bill this week, or both chambers will need to pass a short-term extension. Bill Michaels, Washington.
A new Reuters Ipsos poll finds more Democrats say they are certain to vote compared to 2014, the last non-presidential election year. It also found Democrats have the edge in enthusiasm within most major demographic groups. I'm Barbara Cusack.
The bait was so tempting. Free trip, gifts. Then you got hooked by the sales pitch, bought the timeshare, and you've regretted it ever since.
The maintenance fees kept increasing, and we just didn't want to deal with it anymore.
It was not anything like they showed us when we bought the timeshare.
Timeshares aren't a day at the lake. They're all catch and no release. Unless you talk to Resort Release. We can release you from that timeshare legally and permanently. A+ rated by the BBB, a 100% money-back guarantee, and our clients' 5-star reviews tell the story.
They promised us that it would be quick, and they delivered on that. It just felt wonderful.
Be the one that got away. Call now for a free consultation. 888-308-5955. 888-308-5955 or resortrelease.com.
We're very satisfied with the results that Resort Release achieved.
Thank you very, very much.
They catch. We release. Resort Release. 888-308-5955. 888-308-5955 or resortrelease.com.